3 minutes after 10 is the time, and it is as reliable as swallows turning up in summer, isn't it? Every time you think you've seen the absolute nadir of political sycophancy and client journalism, along comes a story to prove that you ain't seen nothing yet. Conservative colleagues and various client journalists in the right-wing newspapers queuing up this morning to claim quite incredibly that the inquiry into the political response, the government's handling of the COVID-19 crisis should not have access to communications between the people in charge of the government's response to the COVID-19 access because privacy or something. I mean, every time you think it can't get any more ridiculous, and the British public cannot be let down any more spectacularly by what passes for journalism in this country, up pop the Boris Johnson fans to tear up whatever little standards and integrity 80-odd% of that profession have left. No, you can't. I mean, imagine if you're investigating the collapse of a bank. It'd be ridiculous to suggest that the financial authorities should have access to WhatsApp messages exchanged by the board of the bank or by the top executives of the bank. Imagine if you were investigating the collapse of a supermarket chain. You've got to respect the privacy of the chief executive. What if he was texting people saying that the head of frozen goods was an absolute flump? That's not fair. You can't keep that. Oh, my goodness, these people. You can't expect Boris Johnson to be treated like the person who was actually in charge of the COVID-19 inquiry. Honestly, there are some days where I have to give my head a wobble to make sure that I haven't woken up in a parallel universe or on the Star Trek holodeck. Luckily, I guess, for Boris Johnson, luckily perhaps for you, because I accept there's only so much you can bear of being reminded of his utter unfitness for any office at all, never mind the highest in the land. We have the immigration statistics. And a little bit of my heart sinks at those words because I have been doing this job for quite a long time now, and it takes a long time for the psychological tanker to turn around. So even if the public feeling about a story has changed or about an issue has changed, for me, the psychology that I attach to that story, the feelings actually that it engenders in me stay the same. So despite the fact that it contributed in large part to this program becoming so successful, I didn't technically enjoy my duels and jousts with racists back in the day. The clips that, apart perhaps from the ones about which law it actually was that Brexit voters were looking forward to not having to obey anymore. Spoiler alert, they could never think of any. Apart from that, it was probably the dealings with racists on this programme that promoted us into the Premier League of radio shows. But I didn't enjoy it for two reasons. Number one, it's like looking into the abyss. And Nietzsche said something about the dangers of looking into the abyss that I can never quite remember. And number two, I don't think anybody who rang in to tell me that they were voting for Brexit because there were too many brown faces in Sainsbury's, I don't think any of them ever went away feeling helped, you know? I don't know that we ever really brought any light into their lives. The determination to believe that the state of your own existence is a consequence of people arriving from elsewhere with, in many cases, but by no means all, even less than you've got, as opposed to a criminal distribution of wealth that gets worse with every passing year of Tory government is actually quite depressing. I know that a lot of people listening let the light in because you keep telling me, and I'm not sure there's any more gratifying experience for me professionally than people telling me that until they started listening to this programme, they believed what they read in the Daily Mail, for example, or they believed what they read in the Sun. But my heart sinks at the immigration story, even though it necessarily shouldn't, because public feeling, public fury, is not what it was. And I know that because of the polling. I don't know if you can remember the cavalcade of front pages back in the day that detailed the absolute determination to demonise anybody coming here from anywhere else. I mean, the Islamophobia was off the charts. I was with Sadiq Khan last night at the Royal Festival Hall for the launch of his book, and I'm reading the bit about how Zach Goldsmith deployed the worst kind of racist dog whistles in a London mayoral campaign. Zach Goldsmith, perceived as a progressive conservative. And no, this will sound odd, and I may be indulging in a little bit of white privilege, and I appreciate the small boats rhetoric and the refugee rhetoric remains rancid, but things have got a lot better since 2016 in the context of people like Farage trying to turn you against Romanians or Poles. At least the focus of hatred has narrowed down to dinghies now for a lot of people. They're not furious about the Polski sklep on their high street, which the Sun encouraged you to be on the morning after your Brexit vote. Some of the stuff that went on then was absolutely incredible. Everywhere you turned, someone was bellowing about immigration. And then they got what they wanted. They got 52% of the country to vote to smash themselves over the head with a rusty old frying pan. And it stopped. It stopped almost overnight. Started again when Farage turned up at Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars, rubbing his thighs and trying to get noticed on social media, but not in anything like the same way. And the public opinion, the opinion polling shows that it is no longer anything like a concern as acute as it was when it was lower. Could there be a more pertinent mark of the madness that accompanies this issue than that simple fact? Public concern about immigration is lower than it was when immigration was lower. There are no laws of logic under which that can make sense, I don't think. The idea that immigration is higher than it has ever been, but public concern about immigration is considerably lower than it was back in 2016 when people texting me, "We're out, get over it," were voting to smash themselves over the head with a rusty old frying pan. It's quite incredible, isn't it? And I mean, it leaves me, I'm open to suggestions this morning, it leaves me with a couple of questions. I'll just give you a few examples. Migrant mothers cost NHS £1.3 billion. Illegal migrants flooding into EU. Britain has too many migrants. We can't stop new migrant surge. 2 million EU migrants grab our jobs. Migrants keep on pouring into EU. French to let migrants head to Britain. Migrant crisis will kill off EU. New jobless migrants benefit scandal. Britain faces new migrant crisis. TV Knoll sparks migration row. No end to migrant crisis. That's the one I'd quite like to read more of. How did TV's Knoll spark a migration row? No end to migrant crisis. Migrant crisis will kill off EU. Migrants told to keep out of EU. Did they do the same headline twice, or have they just reproduced? No, they've got the same headline twice. They're two different. No, they can't have done. Anyway, migrants told keep out of EU. Kick out foreign crooks. We can't stop migrants. EU opens door to 79 million from Turkey. Britain faces migrant chaos. Migrants will pay more for NHS. Britain's 1.5 million hidden migrants. Soaring cost of teaching migrant children. Migrants cost Britain £17 billion a year. Britain's 1.5 million hidden migrants. That's the Express. Daily Mail, ready for this? Migrants channel stroll to asylum Britain. Britain's broken borders. PM, why we must not take 3,000 migrant children. Exodus, 3 million UK workers are now foreign. Europe, the real crisis. 1 million more migrants are on their way. How Blair cynically let in 2 million migrants. What a waste. Migrant Mr. Big. The Great Migrant Con. We're stuffed. Anarchy near the UK. Pull the other one, Dave. Surrender on illegal migrants. National Handout Service. Poll chancers. Jungle warfare. Great migrant swindle. Brits not fair. Crushing verdict on open door migration. Deadly cost of our open borders. 1.6 million migrants from the EU settled in Britain. Betrayal of white pupils. Warning on UK Muslim ghettos. Migrants smuggled to UK for just £100. Osborne's 3 million migrant bombshell. Migrant workers blow to Cameron. I've just done that from memory. I haven't done that from memory. I did it from a sheet of paper put in front of me that takes about 20 seconds to collate or to recall. And then it was almost as if the fuel pump was switched off. The gas was turned down. Because suddenly, with the exceptions of one-trick ponies like Farage and a couple of others, suddenly you weren't being urged to hate your Polish next-door neighbour or to dream of the day when there'd be fewer brown faces behind the tills in Sainsbury's, and it has sort of gone away. So who do I want to talk to today? Well, as always, all are welcome, 0345 60 60973. I think I want to talk to someone who can't believe how angry they were in, say, 2016 about immigration because they hear the figures today and they can't feel any of the old juices flowing. None of the old fires are raging. And I promise to be respectful. It's very, very important to me that in the months and years to come we have a space on this programme where rapprochement and reconciliation can unfold. It involves a recognition of reality. But I did say at the time, I was reading a piece I wrote, would you believe, for the Mail on Sunday, of all places, after I did an interview with Nigel Farage in which he sort of soiled himself live in the studio and got dragged out by his own PR man, a truly ludicrous individual called Patrick O'Flynn, I think, or Flaherty. And even the Mail on Sunday was writing articles about how Farage was finished. They commissioned me to write an article about it because even they were thinking, oh, crikey, are we going to be able to back this still after that humiliation? And I said at the time, that, trust me, you just look at my inbox. There's people listening to this who think he came out on top. Same thing happened with my Jacob Rees-Mogg interview a few years later when he was talking about how cheap food was going to be and how Northern Ireland wasn't going to pose any problems at all for Brexit and sundry other things that were slightly at odds with reality, but people are so desperate to believe what they want to believe. In Farage's case, that immigration is the root of all evil. In Rees-Mogg's case, that Brexit will make everybody better off. That you can't reach them. So I knew then, and I know now that some people will never admit reality. But it must have been awful. I always remember the fella who rang in to say that his wife had made him put his laptop away. It was during the rise of Little Tommy 10 names. That horrible period of British history where you have articles in The Spectator about why Tommy Robinson wasn't such a bad egg after all, and people would be falling for all sorts of, well, I've just read you the headlines on ostensibly and supposedly respectable middle-class newspapers, so God knows where the unrespectable side of the British media was going at the time. But you look back on that, and I did say at the time, some decent people are falling for this. Some decent people are falling for this. So what fascinates me today is the transformation in somebody who thought that immigration was the worst possible thing happening to this country in, say, 2016. But today sees the new figures today, and you don't feel ambivalent about it, but you certainly don't feel a fraction of the rage and fear that you felt when the figures were considerably lower than they are now. And don't forget that if it wasn't for Brexit, then in many ways these numbers would be even higher because people are now leaving who don't need to leave. They just don't want to be here anymore. It's not that you've stopped new people coming in, because there's more people coming in than ever before, but people who quite liked being here don't want to be here anymore. We've made it, for European people, European citizens, we've made it a less desirable place to live. So, I mean, listen, it's an odd question, and it's a tiny possibility that the constituency is as big as I think it is. But I spent a lot of time feeling enormous sympathy for people whose brains were being boiled by the kind of front pages that I just read to you. And there are so many of them. You know, we barely scratched the surface. Every single day you could turn on your radio or walk past your newsagents and you would be told to hate immigration. And inevitably, as a consequence of hating immigration, many, many people ended up hating immigrants. And now it's gone off the charts. Now it's higher than it ever was before. But I don't want to do a sort of dance of Schadenfreude. I don't want to say, if you're one of those people that voted to have fewer brown faces in Sainsbury's, how do you feel about the fact that you've made everything worse? I don't think that's helpful, actually. It's slightly tempting, you know. But I'm more interested in talking to people who are a little bit baffled by the fact that today you are unconcerned, perhaps, or certainly unmoved, unenraged by figures that should have, or would have once, had you going off like a firework. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973. And the second question, which everyone can have a crack at, if in Suella Braverman's universe, so the Home Secretary who is in charge of immigration today will be casting herself as a doughty scourge of immigration while simultaneously announcing record figures of immigration. It's quite a bizarre situation into which any politician can inveigle themselves, but she's not a normal politician, is she? She's both diabolical and spectacularly stupid. But she tries to speak to a constituency of people who hate it still. She's constantly swearing blind she's going to reduce it further, even though the number of people calling for that diminishes daily. What the people who wanted to get rid of EU migrants and have now affected an influx of non-EU migrants on the scale of which we've never seen before. What would the world look like in which immigration was not a debate? I'd like to live in that world. Are there any countries in the world where immigration figures are just like weather forecasts? Oh, okay, there's going to be 600,000 next year. There were 200,000 a year before. Might be a bit more a year after that. The simple rules of supply and demand, all of that. Is there any country in the world where that happens, or is it always weaponized politically? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. I mean, sort of clarify slightly what I'm asking for, because I appreciate it can sometimes be a bit confusing. But if these numbers had come out in 2016, right? If these numbers had come out in May of 2016, I think we can all agree that the Brexit vote would have been bigger than 52%, right? The deliberate demonisation and weaponisation of immigration was a huge part of getting that project over the line. Today, these figures will not prompt anything like the anger and concern that they would have done then. And I want to know why. And I really, 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 really want to know why you think you have changed. And I did just say think by accident. Why have you changed? Why would figures that in 2016 would have blown your brains out, they've come out this year, they've come out today, and you are, if not relaxed about it, although I'd love to talk to you if you're relaxed, if not relaxed about it, you are nowhere close to the levels of apoplexy that you would once have felt. All right? Go on, help me out on this one. It's a sophisticated question, but I have enormous faith in you. 0345 6060 973. 23 minutes after 10 is the time. I suppose I could have said that in a much shorter way. All of those headlines I read you, all of those, borderline racist, deeply inflammatory, divisive and provocative headlines designed to turn people against immigrants, against immigration. I don't think you're going to see them tomorrow, even though the numbers are higher than ever. And I don't fully understand why. So have a crack at that. That excuses you from being personally involved in the story as well. 0345 6060 973. Why won't tomorrow's front pages be anything like as obnoxious as the countless front pages we saw when immigration was considerably lower? Andrew's in Barnsley to kick things off. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Andrew.
Yeah, I can really put you in the picture with this one, because I've seen a lot about it in the media myself and in newspapers recently. I've even heard you saying, how come that we've got no unemployment and we're short of jobs
and huge amounts of vacancies.
Jobs we can't fill.
Yes.
Yeah, if this is the thing, if migration is at record levels compared with 2016. The reason we're in this situation, and I was concerned about migration levels in 2016, and I'm not so much today.
Okay.
The reason is, James, a vast amount, probably the greater cohort of EU migration under the freedom of movement into the UK, it was temporary people, young people a lot of the time.
Yes.
And they came and worked in a lot of the factories, certainly right in my town, a massive cohort. Examples, your HGV drivers, it was a massive cohort, but they would never registered as being settled. They didn't really intend to settle.
Right.
A lot of the young kids maybe did 3-6 months, went back home. Another big cohort came.
Yes.
So, and we saw that in towns like mine, in all the Red Wall. It affected jobs, paying conditions, services to a massive, massive degree. Simply because the numbers you're talking about and comparing today don't show that, and it was a far bigger number of, in millions. If we actually ever did get to know how many, because people, they didn't get off the bus at Waterloo Station from Warsaw, and somebody with a clipboard said, "Oh, who are you? Are you staying? Are you coming?" And there was no traceability, other than which you can clearly see it's still in the jobs market.
Right, but the people
full employment today,
yeah,
and we're short. There's vacancies we can't fill, despite what you're headlining as record
I think I understand what you're saying. The people that you were unhappy about were the people who were coming here to work, though. That's a bit at odds with quite a lot of the traffic at the time, isn't it? That it was usually people who
substituted. People they took jobs from Brits, older Brits. I know my brother had 4 years unemployment in his mid-50s. He got a job as soon as the referendum results started to bite in. To Christmas 16, a big local bakery in Barnsley, a massive concern. It were really all the big concerns. Naturally enough, they wanted young, fit, able workers.
Yes.
They wouldn't take somebody like my brother on, who lived a mile from the bakery in mid-50s. They'd have somebody from 2,000 miles away in his 20s. So my brother had to sit and freeze with no heating, with his hands turning blue, and be unemployed on benefits. You see, that was what freedom of movement meant, James.
To people like your brother, and the 1.2 million who came in 2022. Just to be clear, what do you think they're doing?
Well, it's not impacting on jobs that I'm describing to you. It's not HGV drivers are on better money now, UK-wide, not just in my town. So then, it's as I said to you at the beginning, James. You don't know, and I don't know the exact number that were coming over as freedom of movement that were never registered. You see, as settled migrants. There was just obviously no government statistics to provide that answer, but people felt it. It was real. It existed in towns like mine.
And so today's figures to you are meaningless.
Yeah, James. I mean, there's 60 million people on this island. So if
as far as we know, Andrew.
Extra, there'll be more. If there's 600,000 more in a year, it's probably a drop in the ocean, James. And it certainly is nothing to get rattled. I mean, if it was the same scenario, James, if that big bakery in Barnsley was employing lots of these 600,000 and this people like my brother were sat freezing and hadn't got a job, then we'd be getting worked up again, James. But obviously the numbers that this 600,000 doesn't reflect a tsunami of immigration and migration in the way that freedom.
I find this fascinating. So I mean, essentially, and obviously your experience is personal, but I don't think it would be fair to call it anecdotal. And a lot of businesses have shut, of course, as a consequence of the difficulties of getting staff. And if wages are going up, then it means that in the middle of a cost of living crisis, everybody's costs are going to be going up more than they would have done otherwise. But on a very personal level, because your brother got a job, you are now more relaxed.
Well, not just my brother, James.
No, I'm sorry, that didn't sound fair. Yes, exactly, because there's 5.2 million. There's 5.2 million people who are registered unemployed at the moment.
Businesses do close, and different businesses have different reasons to close. It's not that you can blame Brexit for closing every business, but what you can say about Brexit,
a lot of the businesses that are closing
it's delivered full employment for the working people. So, maybe it's a negative for some business owners, but it's a bigger positive in the UK employment market. These 600,000 new migrants can have a job. We don't have to say they're going to be unemployed in Brexit UK.
1.2 million new people. Because, part of the problem...
Jobs,
I hear you, but how many do you think left last year?
Well, there's always coming and going.
No, I know, but how many do you think left? How many do you think left last year?
I don't know, James. Don't know.
Because I like your analysis, and it's oddly positive in many ways. But the idea that we've sort of seen a decline or a removal of people leaving, and therefore creating opportunity. 557,000 people left the country last year.
Well, they always do, isn't they?
That's the highest. That's the highest ever.
There's immigrants,
that's the highest ever. But what I like about your analysis is that you're sort of saying the numbers are meaningless because whatever the figures say, I don't believe.
It's settled migration.
Okay. But it's not settled migration if 557,000 people left last year. That's all I'm pointing out.
Yeah, but But
there's no but there, really.
I'm not disputing the figures
No.
in 2016 what they had.
And of course,
for
unemployment's
petrol,
not
and
zero.
today.
And to the massive number of vacancies in the country, what do we say to that?
Well, that's a positive for working people.
Yes.
You know, that can only go two ways.
In the NHS? What about working people? What about Andrew? I've given you a fair old crack of the whip, mate. So I will have I'll have a couple of bites back now, if I may. What about working people who need NHS services and can't get them because of all the shortages?
Well, the system now is for visa migration.
But we've got that in place, and there's now
26.2K, haven't they, salary?
Okay, so are you going to answer any of the questions I asked, Andrew? Andrew, I've really carefully given you 10 minutes to say whatever you wanted, and I just would like to give myself a couple of minutes to come back at you. All right?
Right. Well, okay. I'm saying that let the people come to the NHS, provided the pay. I've
got to go to the news now, but huge vacancies, good for working people, and I am delighted your brother got a job back. And the first call on immigration figures, perhaps predictably, hinges upon the notion that you can't trust the immigration figures. But here we are. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 10:36 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's still a discomforting conversation because I'm conscious of how many people listening to this are being spoken about rather than being spoken to. So I'll try and open the conversation up to you very, very shortly. I never sit here listening to or conducting immigration conversations or immigration debates. And I'd say again, I wish I lived in a country where they didn't even exist. But I'm not one of them. What does it feel like when you turn on most days, we're all in it together. Daylight today, you turn on your radio and you're not part of the conversation. You are the conversation. You're not speaking to the radio. You're being spoken about on the radio. 0345 6060973. Quite a few of you pointing out that it's unlikely anyone ever got a job the day after the referendum as a consequence of the referendum result. But I liked Andrew's call, not least because there's someone who was cross about immigration in 2016 and who, for reasons, is not cross about it today. And I would like to hear from you. I'd also like to hear from people looking at the bigger picture. Why? I could be wrong, but I honestly don't think the Mail and the Express tomorrow will be going absolutely bananas about this. I don't. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong, but I could be wrong. So if, like me, you watch these stories and you watch these trends and these movements with a sort of sense of sadness most days, because it can be such a sort of corrupting statistic, it can have such toxic influence on politics. If, like me, you do that, then what I'd love to hear is why you think the immigration conversation has been detoxified in terms of these numbers, in terms of net numbers, in terms of people coming here and people leaving. Why has the immigration conversation apparently lost a lot of its oomph, lost a lot of its toxicity? Andrew's answer, because things have actually got better, which, listen, everyone speaks from where they sit. Cost of living crisis, inflation, job shortages. If your life has got better and you think it's a consequence, I can't quite do that, can I? Because, okay, so if you ignore the statistics and say there's actually less immigration, not more, and my life has got better, then there's a reason why you'd be more comfortable in 2023 than you were in 2016. 10:38 is the time. Richard is in Maidenhead. Richard, what do you think?
Oh, hi, good morning, James. Nice to speak to you. I think I'm coming at this from a slightly different point of view. I was definitely a Remainer. I didn't really have any problem with the level of immigration then, as such. I'm probably Suella Braverman's worst nightmare. I think she's disgusting, and our attitude to asylum seekers should be very different to what it is at the moment. There should be a lot more empathy. However, I've got to agree with the last caller to a little extent. I don't believe the figures either. Oh. And it might be mistrust of this government and just in complete incompetence in everything they do.
Can't really do a phone-in about figures if we're not going to take the figures as the starting point.
Okay,
but tell me more about
ignore
why you don't believe the figures.
Just from what you see in day-to-day life.
Yeah, go on.
We're always told that we're only, this is the Tories after all, we've got to take it with a pinch of salt, that we're only going to be importing, to put it that way, or letting people immigrate in key professions that we are short of labour or short of key skills. And while that is a short-term solution, so doctors, nurses, care workers, etc., and that certainly I don't want to discourage that overall. That doesn't seem to be explained. 600,000 net immigration. I don't believe for a second that they're all in these key sectors.
You said day-to-day life.
Well, yeah. I mean, basically every delivery driver is someone who can't speak English.
Right.
And I don't have a problem if they are...
Well, why bring it up?
No. What I'm saying is, like, day-to-day evidence shows that there is loads of people coming into the country that don't meet any of these requirements and are just coming in to meet really low-skilled and possibly black economy jobs.
Right.
So look at car washes, look at nail bars, look at slightly dodgily run corner shops, people putting their cousin on the Uber account.
You do sound exactly like someone who would have phoned me before the Brexit or shortly after the Brexit referendum telling me why they voted for Brexit. So you think that... No, I know you're not that. I know you're not that person. Yeah. I'm just telling that because people listening would expect me to point out that's exactly what you sound like. So No.
I appreciate
your contention is that
normally I completely agree with you.
I haven't got an opinion yet. I don't know what my opinion is. I was just asking the question as to why people are less angry about immigration than they were in 2016, but you're actually more angry or more concerned.
I wouldn't say I'm not concerned. I'm concerned, not angry. You know?
Right.
I'm concerned. I just don't think it's working, and I think long term.
But all the things you're pointing at are the things that Brexiters pointed at. Every single one.
Yes, to a certain extent.
No,
and I
completely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. I think there was a lot of more overt racism and rhetoric around what the Brexiteers said.
I mean, people talking about other workers not being able to speak English and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Look,
because we hate that, don't we?
Oh, no, I don't hate that.
Because you just did it.
No, I didn't say I hated it, though. I'm saying what that is it is a sign of that the immigration laws aren't working.
Right.
If we're only letting in people... And as I said, I would encourage us to let in far more asylum seekers. I think
what you're doing and what I'm doing and what Andrew is doing and what possibly none of us realise we're doing is we don't know what the immigration debate is anymore.
Yes, well, exactly. You said, but you at the beginning of the conversation, you said, let's not start discussing the figures because we've got to have some kind of basis for discussion.
No. I said let's not start having a conversation about the figures that hinges upon the idea that we can't trust the figures. The only starting point we have today is the announcement of the latest net immigration figures. And that is, I mean, I'm grateful to you for ringing in, but phone-ins about why you can't believe the facts that the phone-ins are based on are a little bit anti-vax, to be honest with you. So I sort of steer slightly away from that. But we don't know what the immigration debate is, you and me. You're saying things, despite caveating it very carefully, you're saying things that sound exactly like what racists sounded like in the run-up to the referendum. I fully appreciate you don't see yourself in that light at all. That's what I'm hearing. That's what a lot of people listening are hearing. Complaints like Farage complained about people on trains not speaking English. You've got
not people on trains.
It's delivery drivers. It's completely different. But we don't know what the debate is today. You feel looking around that there are too many foreign people here who you don't feel are sufficiently skilled.
And I don't.
That is okay, and I get that, but you're not again in the category. The category might not exist. Andrew was in it, but not necessarily for reasons that will be widely shared. The idea that life has got better, and that again, I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? If you can't trust the figures, you can't have this conversation. But we will continue to try. Toby's in Salzburg in Austria. Lovely water in Austria. Oh, that was in Vienna. Toby, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I can tell you why the water in Vienna is so lovely.
Go on.
Because it comes from Styria over an aqueduct. There's like 60 miles. Yeah,
is that
they
right?
Pump it from the Styria. Yeah, it is right. Yeah, it's a feat of engineering you would love to see. It's the aqueduct from Styria to Vienna.
It is the most delicious tap water I have ever tasted, Toby.
I heard, yeah.
Carry on. Talk to me about... I mean, do we change the conversation slightly into what is the immigration debate actually about now? But you rang in before we framed that question, so...
Yeah, I think people are more relaxed about it, and I think that will be the spin of the right-wing media by tomorrow.
Yes.
That these 1.2 million people that arrived include, as far as I'm aware, more than 200,000 from Ukraine.
And Hong Kong.
50,000 from Hong Kong.
Yes.
So if you deduct them, everything's going the right direction because the bad immigration went down.
And the bad immigration was. Well, you've got
EU citizens stealing our jobs, or your jobs. I've got no skin in the game. I'm Austrian. So EU migration, and people who don't live in a war zone, who are being blamed for moving there for economic reasons.
We've
so
still
you can
got
spin it the way that the numbers went down.
I mean, I think you might be right, but you've still got, even if you take out 250,000 people from the categories you describe, you've still got just shy of 1 million people coming into the country in 2022. And
but 550,000 left.
Well, precisely.
So it's net migration.
You know, and I know that 6 or 7 years ago, I wouldn't even mention people leaving on my front page. I read you an example of them earlier. I'd just tell you that even after the Ukrainians are taken out of the list, there's nearly 1 million people coming here every year, and people are not currently enraged by it in anything like the way they would have been 7 or 8 years ago. So you've still got
to worry about, and again,
I think you're right.
It's not a bad migration, and you can. I don't want to put money on it. I'm not a betting man, but I think in tomorrow's newspapers you will read that everything's heading the right way because net migration, if you take out humanitarian, has gone down.
I hope so. So what's mad about this analysis is that it means that the Conservatives, who are still weaponising immigration and still seeing it as an absolutely powerful electoral tool, are completely wrong. I think you're probably wrong about the newspapers. I think you've gone further than me. I don't think they'll be giving us, 2016 style front pages, but I don't think they'll be giving us everything's going swimmingly either. I think they'll fall somewhere
it's
between.
Swinging the right direction. That the current is going the right direction. Well, we shall wait and see what the newspapers have to say tomorrow.
We will, but that, of course, leaves people like Suella Braverman hanging out to dry, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, she's from a different planet. I mean,
something on which I think
the cohort she's pitching for is, you wouldn't.
Well, the problem is she's pitching.
Man, you would leave the pub if they start renting, right?
Yes, but she's pitching for the Conservative Party membership. Of course, we often overlook this. Just because she might be going for positions that are deeply unpopular or even toxic to huge and growing swathes of the population, for the ageing and ridiculously disproportionately powerful when it comes to electing the next Tory leader, for the Conservative Party membership, for whom, remember, Rishi Sunak was too brown, so they went for Liz Truss, who shortly afterwards got beaten by a lettuce. That is what she's doing. She's absolutely going for them. But this is fascinating and pretty hard to plot or predict. Is there still rage out there? Are people looking at these numbers and having the response that people like Suella Braverman need them to be having? I quite like the idea that they're not. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. 10:48 is the time. I'm going to talk to someone after this who is proof. I have occasionally opined on this programme that cancel culture is a myth invented by crybabies and chicken lickings to describe reality. It turns out it's real, because this government will now cancel you from speaking to expert panels of civil servants and ministers if you have tweeted some mean things that they don't like in the past. And when Edward Lucas explained it to us the first time, he was telling us about a chemical, biological and radiological weapons and warfare expert. And I kind of worked out who he was talking about. So I tweeted him afterwards and said, is this you? Is it you that's been banned from speaking to... And I think I can tell you now that he confirmed that it was, because he's broken cover. His name is Dan Casita. He's an associate fellow at RUSI, specialising in all of those issues. And he has essentially been cancelled by the UK government for mean tweets, as far as we can tell. So you won't want to miss that story after this. 10:53, Jacob Rees-Mogg once again haunts us. In 2022, I don't know whether you remember, he brought in a policy that banned or essentially sought to ban anyone from government events who had perhaps said something that Jacob Rees-Mogg didn't like. That's about as close as we've got to a rationale for this. Dan Casita is, he's a world-renowned expert and a associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, specialising in chemical, biological, radiological weapons and warfare. You were due to speak, Dan. Thanks for coming in at a government event, unpaid.
Unpaid, yes.
At a government conference. You'd been booked, as we say.
Yes, indeed.
And then you received the following letter.
Yes. Dear Dan, we extended an invitation to you as a guest speaker to the Chemical Weapons Demilitarization Conference, and we're glad you accepted. Thank you for your interest in the conference and support. Rules introduced by the Cabinet Office in 2022 specify that the social media accounts of potential speakers must be vetted before final acceptance to the program. This is to check whether these people have ever criticized government officials or government policy. The vetting process is impartial and purely evidence-based. The check on your social media has identified material that criticizes government officials and policy. It is for this reason, and not because we do not value your technical insight, that I'm afraid we have no choice and must cancel your invitation to the CWD conference. I hope this does not come as too much of a shock. Sorry while I laugh. And wish you well in your research studies relevant to chemical and biological arms control. It is good that you strive to achieve a world permanently free of such weapons. Best wishes. And I'm not going to name the official.
No, because he sounds like he's got a gun held to his head.
Well, it sounds like you said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah. So, more than 25 years' experience in the field, addressing the Chemical Weapons Demilitarization Conference in London. You must have, I've had a look through your Twitter, presuming it would be some sort of sewer. Well, you seem to be some sort of liberal Democrat.
Yes, tragically, yes. I'm everybody's worst nightmare. I'm a radical centrist who really thinks that actually we should be nice to each other most of the time.
It'll never catch on. Do you have any inkling of what it might have been that set off their radar?
Well, I don't know. I mean, The Guardian wrote about this. The Guardian points to whether this is based on just the Guardian speculating or whether the Guardian has some insight as to what the tripwire was. The Guardian points to two things. The Guardian points to a thread of tweets that I retweeted comparing Nadine Dorris to a car crash.
A series of car crashes.
A series of car crashes, color-coded. I thought it was funny, and thousands of people seem to have retweeted that. And I also did do a tweet referring to a Afghan military pilot who had fought for this country, who wasn't able to get out of Afghanistan by approved means, came over on a small boat, and he was facing deportation to Rwanda.
Yes.
And I said, bloody Tories.
And those are the two.
Those are the two examples that the Guardian put out.
Having trawled through your Twitter.
Oh, I mean, there's more.
Forensically.
I've got. I don't know how many tweets I've got out there. Probably 750,000. I am.
And you hate people who are on Twitter all the time.
Oh well.
Honestly.
Yes.
Just for context, you have worked in the U.S. Secret Service.
Yes.
You have worked in Bill Clinton's and George W. Bush's administrations as a chemical weapons expert. You give advice to governments around the world.
And international organizations.
And international organizations, including the police in the UK.
Yeah. Interpol. I sit on a panel at Interpol.
And Jacob Rees-Mogg's rule has excluded you from offering your thoughts to a government-sponsored conference on your field of expertise.
Yes. Ironically, a conference that in the past historically has had officials from the Chinese Ministry of Defense.
Well, they're not on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they are, nobody has the skill set to interpret them.
Not
perhaps.
yet.
I don't know. It's a conference that I actually spoke at 2 years ago without issue.
I'm obviously bringing a degree of levity to the subject.
Oh, yeah, it is kind of funny. It's
kind of Kafkaesque, which is for once an accurate word to use in this context.
Yeah. Although people keep pointing to the wrong Kafka, it's just people keep pointing to I've not turned into a cockroach. It's Kafka's castle. I keep trying to find the castle, the Castellan, and nobody will let me talk to him.
How there's two elements now to how this affects you. How does it affect you professionally? How does this because you've chosen to go public. Some people may not have done. It's estimated that about 8 other people may have been in a similar situation from quite different backgrounds. This is speakers banned from government events by a completely unaccountable and opaque vetting scheme. So what impact might it have on you?
Well, is it restraint of trade? In which case it's, I'm a consultant, a writer, and author in this exact field. Now, this is not a field where there is a huge amount of private sector activity. This is, the struggle against chemical and biological weapons, against chemical and biological terrorism. This is by definition a thing that exists in the public sphere. And if I'm being excluded from a bit of the public sphere on this, that's not good. And I've done a lot.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of things that don't get talked about on my Twitter feed.
I'm sure you have.
And people come to me from this government, from other friendly governments, all the time. I mean, not daily, not weekly, but probably monthly on average.
Right.
With asking for help on a technical issue.
It's a skill set. It's a rare skill set
Yeah,
that you have.
yeah. I'm an old fart in a field where people leave early, okay?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, in my field, people tend to do 3, 4, 5 years and find a way of escape. I'm just like the old guys still stuck in the circus, not having found a way to get out.
Which makes you very valuable
Yes.
to public discourse and private
Well,
understanding,
indeed.
Political understanding of complicated issues. Have you heard anything since? Because it could be, to be charitable, it could be one of those scenarios where if Jacob Rees-Mogg were to deign to speak about the consequences of this policy he introduced, he would say, well, I didn't mean people like him.
Well, yeah. Well, in which case I'd say, well, what did you mean then? Let's get this out there. I mean, one of the reasons why I came public on this is that an invidious policy like this needs transparency. There is no transparency. Edward Lucas wrote to the Cabinet Office to ask where the rule was. Well, you can't see the rule. It's eventually going to get published, but when we do publish it, it's only going to be in the House of Parliament library.
Right.
Oh, by the way, it goes back 5 years.
Gosh.
So there's a rule that I'm expected to follow that goes back 5 years, but I can't read it. That's some, as I told the Times the other day, I'm half Lithuanian. I can smell Stalinism. And there's a whiff of Stalinism about that. Secret rules that nobody voted for. There's no act of parliament I've broken. And so if I'm caught up by this, who else is caught up by this? And is it stuff, frankly, that is more important to daily life than this? Is it infectious disease experts, emergency management experts, people with strategies on crime, people who talk about immigration and asylum seeker policy, who have valued things to say? How much expertise is being excluded from the public sphere?
You've segued into the second question I was going to ask you, which is about the impact on democracy. But you make an incredible point because of the opaqueness.
Yeah.
It means that it's not even being critical of the government that excludes you from inclusion in these sort of events. It's their perception or their insistence that you've been critical of.
Oh, yeah.
Who is allowed to contribute?
Well, yeah, and what actually is the standard is, I mean, honestly, if I want to call Jacob Rees-Mogg a wazzock, that's protected speech.
Yes. And it certainly has no impact upon your value as a chemical weapons expert.
Well, if I were a civil servant,
sure.
Yes, I'd have some administrative handcuffs on me. I'm not a civil servant. I'm a private citizen.
How do you push this? What happens next? I know Edward Lucas has taken up your case. He's a parliamentary candidate, so he has a degree of heft, but not a surfeit.
Various members of the House of Commons and the Lords have started asking questions, and I've started giving information to them. Other people have started coming forward on this. And that's part of it, too, is to get other
victims.
Get part of shedding light on this is to try to get this rule flushed out to the public, get the decision-making process flushed out, and I dare say when we flush that out, nobody's going to like it, but also to ferret out other people who've been affected.
Yes, of course.
And a lot of people won't know they've been affected because
the invitation never arrived.
Yeah, or there's 1,000,001 ways to uninvite somebody without saying the quiet part out loud.
Yes, of course there is. Sorry, we've had a bit of a rethink. I hear producers doing it here all the time.
Yeah.
We've had a bit of a rethink. The running order's changed, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We'll keep in touch.
All right.
Because you add us to the shoulders at the wheel of trying to get some sort of answers to what the hell is going on.
Indeed.
Normally, I balk at the use of the word Stalinism. I'm sure you do too, even more with your background.
Yes, exactly.
But on this occasion, if the cap fits,
it's.
I think it was Lenin. It was Lenin that wore the cap. No, it was Stalin that wore the cap. If the cap fits, then crack on. Danka Sita, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is a huge, briefly and slightly flippantly, presumably you've been inundated with support from the Free Speech Union and the right-wing media and the kind of people that were at the Nazi conference last week and banging on all the time about free speech.
No, answer came there none. Crickets. Silence.
Well, perhaps now they will be in touch.
Well, we'll see.
We will.
And I'll be happy to come back at some point.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely be happy to see you. Danka Sita, Associate Fellow, as I say, at the Royal United Services Institute, international expert, government and organiser advisor on chemical, biological, radiological weapons and warfare, and now, from the perspective of the British government at least, cancelled with neither cause nor explanation. All right. It's 11:04. It is 7 minutes after 11. We went quite late to the news there because Dan Casita's story was absolutely riveting, wasn't it? And deeply, deeply troubling. We will no doubt return to that in days, weeks, months to come. Sadiq Khan is on the line. Refreshed, I hope, after the very successful launch of his new book, Breathe, at the Royal Festival Hall last night. But it's kind of hard to get politicians, or government politicians, to pop up and talk about the immigration figures. But even people from your party are banging the drum, Sadiq Khan, about how terrible this is and woe is me, we must do less. How do you respond to today's numbers?
Well, let me be quite clear, and I speak not just as the Mayor of London, but as somebody who's lived in this city all my life. Immigration has benefited this city for decades, economically, socially and culturally. Many migrants are our neighbours, our colleagues and our friends, and they make a massive contribution to London being the greatest city in the world. And my worry about this conversation that's been had today, the way in the days leading up to the figures today, the word association is migrants with negativity. Listen, the reasons why we can't get appointments with our GPs, the reason why our elderly relations are waiting so long for an operation, the reason why young people can't get genuine affordable homes to live in or decent school to go to is not because of migration. It's because of successive policies from this government in particular over the last 13 years. Had we built enough affordable homes, had we invested in our hospitals, had we invested in GPs, we wouldn't have these problems. And so I think it's really important that we frame this narrative the correct way.
I wonder whether this is going to surprise you. This is only one radio show, but obviously LBC over the years, and this programme in particular, have often been weather vanes of immigration debates, with presenters pursuing very different positions on the desirability or otherwise. If I said to you that at the moment I don't think these numbers are prompting anything like the upset or the anger that we would have seen most certainly in 2016 and probably subsequently, would you be surprised? And I stress again, it's close to anecdotal. It might be the biggest show in town, but it is still only one show.
I'm not surprised. I'll tell you
really?
Why, James.
I am.
Yeah, let me see why. I speak nearly every day with employers in London. I can't think of an employer I've spoken to who's not got vacancies or is not worried about skill shortages or labour shortages. And I make this point, in the context of the Brexit campaign, if you remember, a lot of the discussion and debate, it was a proxy for reducing immigration, wasn't it? You take back control. What does that mean? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And actually, people now realise, Brexit has been catastrophic for our city. It's been catastrophic for, our economy. It's been catastrophic for our public services. So people are starting to wake up to that in relation to, actually, you know what? We were sold a pup. You know what? When they said that, Brexit would lead to sunny uplands, we were sold a pup. And it's really important that, people have the confidence to talk positively about immigration. And I mean my profession as well. My profession are petrified from doing something that good politicians used to do, which is to be teachers. A good politician should be not, playing on fears. We should be addressing people's fears. And if your fear is, I can't get decent housing because of the migrant, I can't get a decent job because the migrant's pitching the job, I can't get the GP's appointment because of, migrants pitching the appointments, that is not true. I spoke last week to, a leading GP, and he said the reason why people can't get an appointment with me as a GP is because of migration. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, previously I could recruit EU doctors. Previously I could recruit doctors from overseas. I can't do that now. And so actually migration is the reason, but not for the reasons people suggest.
Too few doctors, not too many patients. I can't think of a member of Keir Starmer's cabinet, up to and including him, who would say much of what you've just said.
Oh, look, one of the joys of being the Mayor of London is I get to speak for my city, our city. And so,
But you're a Labour member. You've been a Labour member since you were 15. It must upset you that your party isn't taking up the banner that you're waving at the moment.
No, but I know, not just because I've known Keir for 30 years, but, I remember this movement, this party. We are a pro-migration party. What we're not about is uncontrolled migration. Nobody's suggesting at all uncontrolled migration. The problem is, you read the newspapers like I do every day. 95% of that media is not supportive to my party, my movement, and our leader, the Labour Party's leader, Keir Starmer. So you can understand why when Labour politicians do stick their head above the parapet, often they're misreported, and often it gives the impression that we're in favour of uncontrolled migration. We're not.
And Rishi Sunak says today the numbers are too high. Is he right?
Well, what Rishi Sunak is doing is the oldest trick in the book. When you're responsible for, bad things happen and you blame the other. Listen, Rishi Sunak has been a member of the Conservative Party since he was 15, right? He's been a member of this government for a number of years. He was a Chancellor for 2 years. Why doesn't he explain why he didn't do anything to build hospitals, to invest in GPs, to invest in schools, to invest in public services, which are leading to these problems? And what he's doing is it goes back, since, Adam was a boy. You blame the other rather than, accept responsibility for the mistakes of your policies. And we've had 13 years of austerity, a choice made by the government 13 years ago. That's why we've got problems in public services. That's why people can't get decent jobs. That's why, people are having problems. And, austerity plus an extreme hard Brexit equals the problems we're having now, not because of migration.
You haven't seen Suella Braverman anywhere, have you, on your travels? I can tell that you're out and about from the background noise. No one seems to know where she is.
Well, I'm in Tottenham here, out and about with police officers, one of the most diverse parts of our great city. And I suspect, bearing in mind the rhetoric she's been using recently, she wouldn't be the most popular politician here in Tottenham.
And finally, you mentioned the newspapers, correctly typifying their biases and their leanings. Just out of interest, you may not want to answer this, but if they did ramp it up again, if they did go back to the front pages that were so familiar prior to 2016, the daily vitriol, othering and hatred, they could still take the public with them, couldn't they?
Well, what I'd say is this, and I deal with this in one of the chapters in the book that I've written called Hostility. And I think what we've got to recognise is there is a vocal minority who make a big song and dance about certain issues, and in this context, immigration. But I tell you this, James, my experience is the silent majority understand the benefits of migration. And what I'd say to your listeners is, you got to stand up and make your voices heard. Because, listen, those editors of those newspapers and the owners of those newspapers want to sell papers, right? If they realised that what they're reporting is not popular with their readership, if they realise the silent majority actually don't agree with what they say, and not in our name will we allow those sorts of messages to be said, they would change their tune very, very swiftly. You'll remember, after Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and the team won a landslide victory, in 1997, one of the newspapers claimed it was them that won it, right? Because they realised which way the wind was blowing. And similarly, if your listeners, if Londoners, if others, started saying loudly and proudly, migration's been a huge source of benefit to our country, economically, socially, and migratory for more than 1,000 years. But for migration, we'd be an island of sheep and goats, I suspect.
Sadiq Khan, many thanks indeed, and congratulations on the publication of your very good new book, Breathe. Normal service will, of course, be resumed next time you're here for Speak to Sadiq. 11:15 is the time. This is a fascinating morning for me. I don't know what other presenters will discover or have discovered. And there are some presenters in this genre who are in the business of throwing red meat to listeners and trying to stoke up anti-immigration feeling. I don't know whether it works today. I honestly don't. But I do know this: the expected outpourings of anger and rage are not there. In fact, so odd has this morning's phone-in been that we've had a self-described leaver explaining why he's comfortable with record immigration figures. Spoiler alert, he doesn't really trust the figures. And a self-described Remainer claiming that he's deeply uncomfortable with the real levels of immigration. Spoiler alert, he doesn't believe the actual immigration figures. But, the plural of anecdote is not data. Do you think, looking around, looking at your mum, your granddad, your Uncle Keith, is it possible that the immigration... What's the word I want? It's not quite debate. Yeah, all right, let's go for the immigration debate is losing its sting? 0345 6060 973. Because I'd take that as a win. It's 11:16. 19 minutes after 11 is the time. Just a quick word on the passing of Tina Turner. She just I've got nothing particular to add. I was blessed to see her live, quite in quite a small venue as well. It was some sort of TV special. I was in the audience for it, and she was. I mean, I've seen quite a lot of gigs over the years, and she was phenomenal. Truly phenomenal. She was probably in her 60s when I saw her, but you wouldn't have known it from the way she owned the stage. And of course, her life, an astonishing tale, an astonishing story. The abusive husband who made her life a misery, and then the third act, which was one of unparalleled happiness as far as outsiders can tell. I think her husband, her second husband, her widower now, her surviving, I think did he not give her a kidney at one point? I apologise if I've completely imagined that, but it'd be a bit partridge if I had, wouldn't it? But just to say, goodness me, what an absolute legend. It is. And yes, I will. I wasn't going to mention it because it pollutes everything. But one of those dreadful people from the Nazi conference last week chose last night to post a picture of Tina Turner with her rapist husband under the tagline "Good Times." This is someone called Catherine Burble Singh, who you may have seen pop up on your television screens and radio programs when producers and presenters are just desperate for a provocative guest. She's the one who espouses the idea that you must have zero tolerance with children who are naughty or make mistakes. I presume she's claiming now she made a mistake when she posted a picture of Tina Turner with her rapist under the caption "Good Times." 21 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I wonder whose programme she'll pop up on next, unchallenged and unquestioned about that curious transgression. I'm not taking bets. I am, however, wondering whether has the immigration debate shifted today? Do you sense it? I listen, absolutely could be wrong, premature, all of those things. But that was a weird first hour, and normally immigration debates on this programme are fairly easy to plot and predict. And the sense on the inbox as well is that even though Sunak and Starmer are almost competing over who's going to get a grip on this situation, the situation itself not causing anything like the outcry and upset that it used to do. And I, for one, would take that as an enormous win. Sadiq Khan claiming to be unsurprised by the direction of traffic. I'm afraid I am very surprised at the moment and far from confident that we're calling it right. What do you think? Bal's in Derby. Bal, what would you like to say?
Big fan, James. Big fan.
Thank you, mate. Next caller.
Yeah.
No, I'm only joking.
Yeah.
What did you ring in for?
All right. Yeah, so let's take it back. Remember that poster, Farage poster?
Yes.
The one with all the Syrian refugees?
Yes, it was the one he unveiled shortly before Joe Cox was assassinated by a far-right terrorist.
Exactly. So, right, he put that poster on. And then they were all Syrians, but in the disguise of, Turkey's going to join the EU.
Yeah.
Right. But there's deeper meanings behind that. They were all brown faces. Brown faces are going to come. Okay.
Yes.
So that worked. That totally worked. Okay. But he's pulled back. Brexit's a failure, he said. Why is it a failure? Because there's more brown faces coming. So
I don't think that's the reason don't make me flipping defend Nigel Farage, but I don't know that the reason he gave for Brexit being a failure was the proliferation of brown faces coming into this country. I'd be happy to take a bet on whether that's what he feels in his heart of hearts, but I don't think he did actually say that out loud.
Deep down, he probably is a half decent guy.
Well, now you're just being ridiculous.
Right.
No, go on. So what's changed? Yes.
Okay. So at the time, right, we're going to have great deals with Australia, New Zealand, okay, Canada. These were the three countries at that time that were always mentioned. And I'm going, hang on. The Commonwealth's actually, half of it's India. Majority is black and brown faces.
So, okay. But the two countries which are immigrating most into the UK, I think, are Nigeria and India.
Yeah, they're the students.
So yes, but why on the brown face brigade, as in the people who hate brown faces? Why aren't they up in arms about that?
Well, we had a Remainer earlier on today, and he said the delivery driver that pops up, they can't speak English.
Yeah.
Well, they probably can speak English, but they speak English with an accent, but they have a brown face. These roles have got to be filled.
You're saying a lot of things But I'm not quite sure. Let's take this with respect and love, Bal. I'm not quite sure what your point is. What exactly? Why are the kind of people who had a problem with brown faces in 2016 apparently, and I think we both agree they don't seem to be having a fit of the vapours today when we might have expected them to. No, pause and think before you answer, because you've given me 4 or 5 answers to questions I haven't asked so far. What has changed?
It's been building up, a number of years. So it's got to come out.
Right. Okay, Bal, have a good day. 25 minutes after 11. Strange phoning, this, but I think emblematic of perhaps the bigger picture. There is confusion in the room. What is the immigration conversation today? I should have I wouldn't be able to pull it off authentically, but I'd start thumping the desk and say there are too many people. And I could start complaining about nurses with foreign accents or talking about how I know what it's like to be a victim of racism because I've got an Irish surname, and then see if I can get you to ring me in and tell me that you're furious. You're furious about these numbers, but I'm not detecting it, which is politically fascinating and socially uplifting, but I don't want to count any chickens before they have actually hatched. Toby's in Bristol. Toby, what do you think?
So you can't actually keep the answer in literally the last 2 sentences. It's because they've got Brexit done. They don't need the anger. They don't need the everyday telling you that immigrants are the problem. Yes, they are still having headlines. There are still front pages.
Yes.
But what they needed was to rile up people enough to think that it was a disaster and a problem, that Brexit would solve it, when Brexit was never about immigration. It was always about tax avoidance, about getting rid of our personal freedoms, about getting rid of our environmental protections and our workers' rights. That's what Brexit was about. The immigration thing was the vehicle.
I don't even know if it was... I mean, listen, I know that argument and it has an awful lot of weight, but I think, to be honest, I think there was a lot of xenophobia in the minds of the editors and the proprietors.
I completely agree, but I think it was if you...
Not sure there was a master plan, is what I'm saying. It was they'd believed their own mythology, and therefore they had to vanquish the foe. But that must be it, mustn't it? There must be, because what we're talking about is the absence of manipulation.
Yes, and I think if you look at the people who were pushing it the hardest, they needed that, and it tapped into it. And yes, absolutely, there is a very deep-rooted sort of antipathy towards the others in society. But I think that's what it was needed for, and now it's not needed. They've got what they wanted. It's pulled back, so it's still there. Yeah. They're still ticking it over because it keeps attention off.
Well, that's the key question. Could it be revivified? Could it be do you want to know what the front page story in the Telegraph is today? Telegraph arguably has become the most insane of the right-wing newspapers. Front page said millions of jobless benefits do not have to seek work. I said after Brexit that if they do get a handle on immigration, they'll come after the unemployed next, because that's what history has taught us. But even though they haven't got a handle on immigration, they have, for the reasons you've just explained, taken that off the boil. And there's the Daily Telegraph trying to put the unemployed or the sick, the long-term sick, back onto the boil. It's incredibly predictable.
I think even they realised that you could only keep pushing it in people's faces for so long. So they've dialed it back for now. When we come to the next election, it'll ramp up again because they'll want it front and centre in people's heads, because they want to utilise, especially Labour Party's sort of perceived weakness on immigration.
Although that's not going well according to the numbers either.
But it's a perception, isn't it?
Yes, of course it is.
And that's what 30.
Well, he lied at PMQs. He lied about freedom of movement, and he lied about open borders. Albeit it doesn't paint Keir Starmer in a very good light that he did flip flop on freedom of movement in particular. Here's a question then, Toby.
Yep.
Does it mean that people who voted in 2016 as a consequence of immigration provocation and propaganda do not deserve to be described as racist because they were perhaps just temporarily demented?
I think the problem with that sort of feeling that you've got to give them the benefit of the doubt because they were fooled by a very clever and successful campaign is it means that you ignored the racism, you ignored the xenophobia. And I think that's one of the problems with it. It's so insidious that it creeps in and then it becomes your normal. It becomes.
But it's not our normal. It would seem that it's not our normal today.
No, but that's today because we're in sort of the middle of the cycle and therefore it doesn't feel as pressing as the other things that worry people. And so that's why it's not being played. Yeah,
and also, I mean, it's a bit condescending, I suppose, casting people in the role of, you see, I wasn't actually racist, not really racist. I just hated foreigners because the newspapers were telling me to, and they're not telling me to anymore, so I'm cool.
Absolutely.
So there it is. 30 years of the British media in a single sentence. Toby, thank you. It's coming up to 11:30. It is actually Thursday. It doesn't feel like a Thursday. Not sure why. But it means that, of course, come 12 noon today, Mystery Hour will be up and running. Got some good news about the board game as well, which I'll be able to share with you shortly. Thomas Watts here now with your headlines. 33 minutes after 11, a story involving Chris Packham, the TV naturalist and all-round good guy. I wasn't aware. I think I was aware he was pursuing a libel case. I'm fascinated by libel cases because they are so rare and so expensive. But Chris Packham took the decision to sue a website called Country Squire Magazine, and he has just won his libel claim. And has been awarded £90,000 in damages. More on that, no doubt, in tomorrow's newspapers. Chris Packham is I've got to tell you, that is a big deal, taking that kind of libel action against an organisation that had accused him of being a notorious liar and having an obvious nastiness, and it accused him of playing the Asperger's victim card. Good grief. Editor is someone called Dominic Whiteman, and a writer called Nigel Bean, found to have caused serious harm to Packham's reputation. He puts up with some rubbish, does Chris Packham? He really does. Some of the animal rights lot leaving corpses and carcasses near his house. He's spoken about fearing for his safety whenever he's out and about. We had a couple of nasty experiences at the Sadiq Khan thing last night. Language I can't repeat on the radio being shouted at him from the audience, so that it had to affect quite a few evictions. And you know, if you're used to getting Jip on Twitter, I think you can forget sometimes what it's like to get Jip in real life, what it's like to get Jip when you're out and about. It's something Chris Packham knows a lot about, so I guess reputation protection, something that he's taken very, very seriously there. The claim centred on allegations that he defrauded and manipulated people in an attempt to raise funds for a charity that looks after tigers. Anyway, that has been found to be defamatory, and damages have been awarded. It's another illustration of the way in which online stuff that looks like journalism ain't necessarily so. Back to the immigration question, and my cautious optimism that if the immigration debate were a pustule, then it seems to me that some of the pus has been removed, which might have a lot to do with Nigel Farage not really being on the public stage anymore. But does that look true from where you're sitting? As these numbers are released, numbers that are considerably higher than anybody who voted for Brexit in order to, quotes, control immigration, end quotes, was expecting, then what are we doing? Are we seeing a diminution? Tony doesn't think so. He says, are you delusional? Concerns about immigration in your London bubble may not be aired as vociferously as they were. Tony, mate, I'm James O'Brien. I'm presenting a radio show on LBC that is famous for having racists ring in. I'm talking to many, many people about where that anger has gone. It's not an anger you feel. Of course, racists still exist, but does the media political nexus that uses racism to create a toxic atmosphere around all of immigration feel as if it has, perhaps temporarily, lost its sting? I don't know. 11:37 is the time. Outside London, I can tell you racism and concerns about immigration are alive and kicking. I was witnessing Islamophobic abuse of the mayor of London in the Royal Festival Hall in London last night. I don't know where you get this idea. Anyway, Idiot's Corner for you, my friend. Jag's in Wakefield. Jag, what would you like to say?
Hi, can you hear me?
Well,
Hi.
Yes.
So I employ about 100 people in my nursing home. Most of them UK born, and I've run it for 17 years. It's a multi-award winning home. Since COVID, I've taken on about 13 students, foreign students, and we didn't lose anyone through COVID. So we've got a great reputation, and we're doing really well.
Yeah.
And they were fundamental to that. And the work, the hours they put in, the work they did, the care they delivered, the skills they have were fundamental to our journey through that process. And when I look at this whole immigration debate, I just find it so partially offensive, because the way I look at it is that immigration is often being used as a scapegoat so that the media and news cycle is occupied. And therefore, the real debates in this country, why are teachers striking? Why are nurses striking? Why is basically what's actually happening to us in terms of cost of living?
Completely corrupted and camouflaged, isn't it? I mean, it is actually. If it was a foreign country, we'd probably laugh at it for being so completely groomed and gaslit.
Fundamentally, if we look at this, I believe that a lot of this debate is always pandering to the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party are the real decision makers in this country. The fact that we can have Prime Minister after Prime Minister that is solely chosen by the Conservative Party rather than the country is appalling. And then when I look at immigration and I compare it to a country like Canada, who openly welcomes immigration, has seen significant growth. Australia hasn't seen a recession for so long. They're growing because they're embracing immigration now, not they did in the past. And then look at this country. In our area, we had 18 nursing homes before COVID. They have now been reduced to 5, of which we're one of the last 5.
So, hang on. No, I hear you. It sounds like you're reading this. I'm going to have to interrupt if that's all right. You make a compelling case for the importance of immigration and the absolutely intrinsic relationship between immigration and growth, especially in a country with an ageing population like this. Germany's having a terrible time of it at the moment. Germany's gone into technical recession partly because EU migration is down, I think, as a consequence of COVID changing people's habits. But I just want to steer you, and it may not be something that you've got an angle on, to the idea that the conversation feels different today. The conversation so far does not feel anything like as toxic as the same statistics would have been in 2016.
I think what you have to look at is that, 1 million people have come into this country, but what is the demographic of the 1 million people that are coming into this country, and what is the demographic of the 500,000 people that are leaving this country?
Right.
And I think what you'll find is people like myself that are business owners, they are the ones that are actually leaving this country. And this is just me assuming. And the people that are coming into this country are people that are basically the students that I'm employing are doing care worker jobs, but they've got master's degrees.
To subsidise their studies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're basically, most of them, after they've studied, they get a PWS visas, etc. And so they can carry on working, and then eventually...
Do you think this ban, they want to ban the sort of students you described from bringing their spouses with them and family members with them, do you think that's going to have a deleterious effect on the attractiveness of coming here for them?
I think what you've got to realise is there's certain countries on this world that have got significant issues with an ageing population.
Yeah.
And then there's certain countries on this earth, and there's certain countries on this earth that have a very young population. Now, the people with the young populations, most of them have quite decent education systems. So, like, for example, India's creating more graduates than the whole of Europe every year.
Yeah.
And then what it is these graduates have choices. They have choices of going to Canada, America, Australia.
So if you can't take your
UK.
partner with you, then the UK is going to become a less attractive choice.
Yeah, if you look at UK has to make a fundamental decision when the Prime Minister of UK is saying, I want to reduce legal immigration at the time when you've got the highest rates of vacancies in the NHS that I can remember.
It's bizarre, isn't it? And then they both side up. No, I hear you, Jagger. I am going to move on. Just huge criticism from me to anybody. But I got your point already, and I just want to squeeze in a couple more voices before 12 o'clock. But you're right, huge numbers of vacancies, and he's waging war on legal immigration. And of course, when they talk about illegal immigration, quite often they're misspeaking or at least being economical with the actuality. And Keir Starmer is doing the same. He is playing the same game, although not with quite the same rhetorical subtext. The idea that it is out of control is synonymous, I think, with saying that there are too many people coming here legally. And as Jag reminds us, if that's the case, then why is it so hard to fill vacancies? And if you want to attract PhD students here, then making the country less attractive than other countries currently are doesn't seem like a stroke of genius. Also, no sign of Suella Braverman. Has anyone seen her? Keith, have you seen her? Any words? Can you make some calls? Just check under the desk. Is Suella Braverman anywhere? Home Secretary today never stops talking about immigration. Immigration figures come out. Just looking, paging Suella Braverman. Sue Ellen Maybe she's gone back to her old name if she's really gone undercover. She started wearing a Groucho Marx moustache and calling herself Sue Ellen. Suella Braverman, paging Suella Braverman. If anyone sees Suella Braverman, please contact the nearest checkout because her mother is looking for her. She was last seen in the sweets aisle. Anyway, no sign. Thank you, Jack. Mo's in Birmingham. Mo, what's going on?
Hello, James. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome. Have you seen Suella Braverman?
I haven't.
Are you sure? Where are you at the moment? Exactly.
Well, I'm at home in Birmingham.
Okay. Can you check the spare room?
I haven't had the opportunity to see Suella.
Can you check the spare room?
I will do.
Thank you.
Not there.
All right. Carry on.
Okay. I think in regards to your optimism,
yes,
about how people are
might
reacting
be a bit of white
to...
privilege. Might be a bit of white privilege kicking in here, Mo, unintentionally.
I think it's manufactured,
okay.
And that optimism can disappear quite quickly upon design. I think the current cohort of legal migration that's coming to the UK has been successfully camouflaged by this government from the population that's been most weaponized against migration in general from the EU debate.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pick a very general population here. Let's look at the South Asian IT worker. They've been employed in large numbers. They've been brought to the UK. They've been invited to the UK to work here. And they've been successfully, in the eyes of the media and so on, integrated into UK society. And they are operating in a circle that is completely different, as I said, from the population that's been most weaponized to be against migration. So the big problem with EU migration, on the flip side, pre the referendum, was that many of the EU immigrants that had come here went and did the jobs all over the country. So, you had the caller from Barnsley whose brother had worked at the bakery, say, and he'd lost his job because of his perception that an EU worker was more desirable by that company. EU workers were there in public, in the same circles as the populations that have been most weaponized against migrants. And as a consequence, it just cannot be avoided, and the blame could easily be attributed to them. Now, we are told that there are not enough British workers to work in IT, that we need them continuously, that there are no British IT workers that are being detrimented by this migration continuously. The same with the foreign nurses, say, for example. We're continuously told, actually, British nurses have the world as their oyster. They're picking and choosing where they're working and so on. They could go to Australia. They're going to New Zealand. And so they're not being stopped in terms of work here in the UK.
So you're talking about Brits who, and I want to choose my words carefully, but Brits who aspired to the kind of jobs that could also be done by someone with no skills who just got off the bus from Warsaw.
Yes.
That's who was, and that is Andrew in Barnsley's brother. I mean, he'd been unemployed for 5 years, but the job in the bakery was sufficiently unskilled that a man in his 50s could go and do it. Keir Starmer's political package is that person should be aiming higher, but the reality is if you can't aim any higher and there's a 20-year-old Pole doing the job because he's fitter and more enthusiastic than you are, then you're going to hire the 20-year-old Pole to do it. But that 50-year-old man is Nigel Farage's people. They are the gristle of the Brexit vote.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you might be right, actually. I don't care about doctors coming over here. Doctors aren't going to nick my job. Oh, right, if I'm a massive racist, I might start complaining about their accents or something like that. But if I'm an unskilled labourer, then, I hate these young people coming over to work here for 6 months and then learn some English and go home.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, as I said, this optimism, I think, is manufactured, and it could quite easily change. And,
it could definitely easily change. But what about the middle-class Daily Mail readers who see themselves as white-collar and are not under threat from unskilled Eastern European labour? Why were they so effectively groomed into hating immigrants and immigration?
That, I'll be honest with you, is a bit more difficult to understand here because...
Well, buy my next book. Actually, no, buy my first one. It's not all in there, but that is, quite often it's telling people that they're under threat when they're not. So, it very simply involves saying there are some people here coming to steal your biscuits. And the reason why UKIP, for example, always did better in areas where there was very low ethnic diversity was because it's a lot easier to persuade you that immigrants are bad if you don't know any. It is 11:48. Mystery Hour is almost upon us. It is 11:51 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where a couple of texts saying, when I was talking about Chris Packham earlier, I said it was animal rights people who would leave corpses outside. It seems unlikely, doesn't it? But I did misspeak. I mean, it seems unlikely that animal rights, obviously anti-animal rights people, it's a sort of pro-blood sports people as well who have had Chris Packham in his sights for some time. Partly, I suppose, the reason why he felt compelled to take legal action against a website that had defamed him quite vilely, actually, and reports just in that he has won that libel case. 11:52 is the time. I mean, I don't like talking about immigration, but I explained to you earlier that involves a bit of a psychological hangover for me. It goes back to the days when I would be here like a veteran gunfighter, dusting off my Colt 45s every day to try and fight back against some of the agents of evil that were responsible for demonizing immigrants and demonizing refugees, and just that sense today that possibly things are getting better, although, as Mo reminds us, that could be a manufactured or a confected scenario, not least because, as I alluded to when I read out that litany of front-page abuse and racism from the Mail and the Express, if they turn the taps of bile back on again, it's going to be very hard to stop the great British public from drinking from those taps. Lee's in Watford. Lee, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, hi James. Just want to do a quick, it's just counting correction. The stats actually said about 166,000 Ukrainian and Hong Kongs, not 250.
Okay.
Just a quick stat correction.
Thank you.
I think this is
it's quite pertinent, that, isn't it? Because if people are going to try to use it as a way of saying, oh no, things will be fine when that's taken out of the numbers, then the numbers would still look pretty high, although possibly not record breaking.
That's only reducing over time, particularly with the Ukrainians, the Hong Kong guys that wanted to leave have already left, to be honest, right? But anyway, I think the core of your question is about the immigration response, right, to these numbers. It's just time, mate. You had 10, 12 years of the build-up of the EU guys are taking our jobs narrative. This is 1.5 years in to the points-based immigration system, right? So it's about time. And frankly, all the UK is doing is it's importing higher-skilled, longer-term, higher-dependent immigration with flexible, local, lower-dependent EU immigration, right? That's all that's going on. It's quite a simple stat, right? If you look at India and Nigeria, whatever, right? It's 4.4, 4.6 dependents. EU is 2.1 to 2.2, right? Okay. If you look at the stats on remissions home, the average EU immigrant in the UK would send, Western Union published this, 6 to 8% of net income home. Yeah. The average Indian or Nigerian or Ghanaian would probably send home 30 to 40% of net income home.
Why do you know this? Just out of interest, because I feel that I should and I don't, but you do, and you're just the caller on this program. So why do you know this stuff?
I'm looking at, we run an IT services business that we had to kind of pretty much close in the UK and move to the EU because of the non-services deal post-Brexit. So,
but this is a terrible,
from other places, right? So.
I mean, listen, I sense you have no problem with the statistics that you've just shared, but they're both very, very good examples of how completely rubbish Brexit has been, because the people who were persuaded to vote for Brexit because of concerns about people coming over here and sending all the money home, or people coming over here and bringing their whole family with them, you're giving us pretty compelling statistical evidence that those, quotes, problems, end quotes, if you think they're problems, are a lot worse now under the current.
Well, it's more about pressure on public services, right? So the longer-term pressure on public services in the UK are just being enhanced by this policy.
So then why... So you're I mean, because the big question I'm asking today is where is the anger? And in one sense, you're giving us reasons why there should be even more anger, which makes the mystery of where it is even more acute.
Yeah, but it's time, mate. You're looking at 4 to 5 million EU immigrants that have built up over 10 years. We're only 18 months into this transition.
That's what I mean. So if I did a front page story for tomorrow with the statistics that you've just shared, the taps of bile would be straight back on again.
Yeah, big time, right? Because the realisation is, and also don't forget here, mate, in the blue wall, or the middle classes, whatever you want to call it, right? What the net immigration figures show is they're taking the skilled jobs from the kids of British citizens. They're not doing fruit picking. They're not doing factory work for Amazon.
So you think these numbers are storing up another racist explosion a decade hence?
Massive explosion coming, right? Because they're taking the graduate jobs, right? India is producing more graduates.
Except there's not. I don't think that works. So it's your sector, not mine. But if you were a graduate looking for a job in that field, you'd still be able to get it because of the acute shortages. They're coming in to fill positions that are currently vacant, which is why Starmer's position is we need to be training people to fill these positions ourselves. I mean, that looks optimistic. Yours looks pessimistic, but the idea that all of the usual tropes of complaint are going to be reinvigorated and revivified by the new nature of immigration, that knocks a lot of the gloss off my cautious optimism, because it feels sensible. And of course, if Labour are in power when it happens, then the gloves will really be off. If because without Brexit, the Tory papers will not weaponise immigration in quite the way that they would do when a Conservative government is in power. That was an aligning of the planets. We want to get Brexit over the line. You've got a Tory government in power, but it's an anti-Brexit Tory government under Cameron, so we'll go all in on the immigration scaremongering. Get rid of that. Get rid of Brexit. You've got a Tory government in power. We won't go all in on the immigration scaremongering because it will hurt the people in power. Labour get in and the gloves are off, I think, and the bile ducts are wide open again. Peter in Gillingham with the last word on this. It'll only be a minute, Peter. What would you like to say?
Sure. Quick facts. UK and the Changing Europe said that the Brexit, the Ukraine situation influenced the debate because there was one of everyone in every town, village of Britain. So that changed the debate.
I hope so.
Also, I do think that the Brexiteers may have think the issue's solved, but that's a longer conversation. And finally, your caller just mentioned it, and they realised they didn't want white bottoms and pick fruit anymore.
They didn't want what? White bottoms?
But I think the people who voted for immigration haven't gone into the fields and they haven't wanted to do social care, so they don't want to white bottoms. And they don't
white bottom. No, I see what you mean. Social care is a lot more than that, but it's a powerful figure of speech that you use. That these are difficult and exhausting jobs. And when they did a big post-Brexit, do you remember they did a post-Brexit search for people? They even had a name, didn't it? Pick for Britain, or am I dreaming? Did I imagine?
But they do have white bottoms, you're right.
Yes, thank you. I thought you'd been... Keith, you've got to control these things, man. I can't have people popping back up again during my stream of consciousness to start talking about the colour of people's bottoms. But did I imagine Pick for Britain? Or was there a great attempt to try and sign up lots of British people to go and pick all the fruit that was rotting in our fields, and they got like 3 applications when they were looking for several million? I exaggerate slightly for comic effect. It is coming up to 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, which can mean only one thing. Mystery Hour.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
12:03, excuse me, more. 12:03 is the time, and Mystery Hour is upon us. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. Say it like you mean it, James, honestly. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. 3 minutes after 12. And if you haven't listened to it before, you're in for a treat. You ring in with a question, someone else rings in with an answer. Don't be silly. We've been doing it for years now, more years than I care to remember. But so some really, really obvious questions will have been dealt with on a million occasions. I can't, however, outlaw repetition because I don't have the brains or the memory to do so, and I'm afraid I've forgotten what we talked about in the first hour of the programme, never mind everything that's ever popped up on Mystery Hour over the years. But I can tell you that my favourite contribution to this week's edition of Mystery Hour will receive, wait for it, a Mystery Hour board game, which is a lovely bit of kit and is available at mysteryhour.co.uk or in John Lewis, and shortly, I'm delighted to tell you, in WH Smith's as well, we think. So hold on to your hats for that. And that is it. The management's decision is final, and the full terms and conditions are at lbc.co.uk. 4 minutes after 12. Should we crack straight on and do without the introductions? I think we let ourselves down a bit last week, lads. I felt that there were too many questions still on the board, and this is my fault. So if I don't do regular roundups of unanswered questions, I don't get as many answers as I would otherwise get. I don't know why that is, because I like to think everyone is there with their alarms set, tuning in at 12. But I'm obviously wrong. And also, no, even if you are tuned in at 12, you're not going to remember the first 3 questions by the time we get to 20 to 1, are you? That's my job. That's literally my job. And last week I let you down. And I take full responsibility for that. 5 minutes, just like Suella Braverman has done for the immigrant. Oh no, still got no idea where she is. Robert Jenrick is doing it to the House of Commons. Why? Why isn't the Home Secretary doing it? Very odd business, isn't it? Anyway, on we go. Chris is in Welling. Question or answer?
Hey, James, it's a question.
Carry on.
So my question is, before the times of scissors and nail clippers, how did people cut their toenails? So I get it with fingernails, you can chew them, but
yeah.
I mean, I can't get my toes to my mouth. Were they getting somebody else to chew their toenails? Or
I mean, you would have you could use a stone, couldn't you?
I mean, that's going to be quite painful. I can't imagine.
Yeah, but it's better than having
off on a stone,
claws. Well, I mean, how far back do you have to go? I mean, you're talking Neolithic almost, aren't you, on this? I mean, you'd have had sharp blades from pretty much quite early on in civilization, no?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that the first sharp blades would have been things like swords and knives.
No, they wouldn't. They'd have been tiny little things for scooping stuff, like scooping a snail out of its shell or a mussel so that you could eat it. But I mean, this doesn't answer your question. I'm just trying to work out how good a question it is. What sort of era, what sort of period we'd be talking about?
I mean, I wondered it for ages. I find cutting nails really satisfying, and I've just always thought, how the hell did people do their toenails?
I've got 2 inappropriate stories to share with you, Chris, if you're interested. The first is, I haven't tried for a while, but I could actually get my toes into my mouth for much of my life. And I did on occasion bite my own toenails off.
Maybe you've answered the question then. Is that a round of applause for you then, James?
Well, I can't prove it. I certainly can't go definitive. And the second thing is arguably even stranger, which is about 3 or 4 months after starting therapy, I was having a bit of a scratch, Chris. I don't want to go into too much details, but if we say it was a mildly intimate scratch, right? And it really hurt. I went, what the hell? Ow! And I realised that after 40 years or more of biting my fingernails, after 2 or 3 months of therapy, I had just stopped without noticing. And my fingernails had consequently grew to such a length that I hurt myself scratching.
I'm not sure how to respond to that, but
I think you responded in exactly the right way, Chris. I think you responded in exactly the right way. It's a remarkable tale of therapy. Thank you, Chris. What did we do? How did we cut our toenails before, there were implements that make cutting your toenails easy? There's quite a strong chance we didn't. I presume, they grow to a certain level, or you just snap them off when they get really long. I mean, who's going to know? That's an excellent question. I might start giving questions odds. I'm going to do this for 1 week, which means I'll forget by 12, 17. Odds of getting an answer. I'm going to give that one 8 to 1. 8 to 1 odds on getting an answer to that one. Ian's in Liverpool. Ian, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Ian.
So first-time caller. So
welcome aboard.
Pardon me if I'm a little bit nervous. Thank you.
It's only me.
So we know that salting the earth is a bad thing. It kills everything. And there was a news report which kind of sparked my thinking and my question on this.
Yes.
We know that salting the earth is a bad thing. So why describe somebody as the salt of the earth as a good thing? What does that mean?
I think we'll just focus on the second bit. We won't necessarily bring into it the contradiction, the apparent contradiction with salt of the earth, with salting the earth. I think it's probably biblical, is it? Or no, because salting the earth is salt of the earth. I love that question. What's the origins of the phrase salt of the earth? Why do we talk about the salt of the earth as a good thing?
Yeah.
You're on. I'm going to give that 1 to 3 odds on.
1 to 3.
1 to 3 odds on. I'll be amazed if you don't get an answer to that, but, what do I know about anything? We shall... right, we're on. Salt of the earth for Ian and toenails for Chris. 9. All human life is here. 9 minutes after 12. Maria is in Croydon. Maria, question or answer?
I have a question, James.
Yes.
So I have a bit of baby brain. Well, saying that, I have really bad baby brain. So my memory was absolutely sharp until the point I gave birth.
Are you sure?
And
You could be misremembering.
No, as a civil servant, it was very, very good. And then the moment I gave birth, my memory completely went, and my memory is really, really bad now. So I want to know, why is that, and what I can do to get it back, or does it come back?
You're only really allowed one question, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that I can let you get the answer to how you can get it back.
Okay, well then what happens, why does the memory go immediately after you've given birth?
It's a good question. There was a story about this not that long ago, because I mean everyone I know who's had a baby recognises this to one degree or another, but I'm afraid, ironically enough, Maria, I can't remember the details of the story, but I'm not laying claim to ever having had a brilliant memory. I'll find out for you. You've got to be in with a good, what do you reckon, evens on that, Keith? Give that one even? I don't think this is going to be a permanent feature of Mystery Hour, is it? Me putting odds on the likelihood of getting an answer to every single question. In fact, I think I might stop now. I might. So that makes Chris and Ian collect. Do you want to put some odds on your question, Maria? It's not working, is it? It's not working as an addition to Mystery Hour, this at all, is it? Brutal. Evens. 11 minutes after 12 is the time. Clive's in Basingstoke. Clive, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on, Clive.
Right. Whenever you hear a pigeon cooing from a tree, you hear this. Hold on.
Well, this is taking a turn.
You hear a pigeon, it coos. Then it always finishes. Why? Why doesn't it carry on that sequence of 5?
Did you just do that noise yourself, or have you got a trained pigeon? You haven't got a trained pigeon?
No, I'm self-trained pigeon whistler.
Well, it takes all sorts. So it's the final one. I mean, isn't that a bit like... I mean, what makes you think there might be a reason?
Well, why don't they just carry on? It's strange just to finish like that.
It's not. They're cycles, aren't they? Doesn't do it again. It's a cycle. It's just you're just not noticing the first bit is the same as the last bit, but because it's got the last bit coming after the first bit, you're not noticing that it's cyclical.
No, there's always 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so it goes 5-5-1.
Yep.
Not 5-1-5-1.
No. 5-5-1.
5-5-1. I think it's breathing in.
Well, they must all breathe the exact same way then.
It's a shame, Clive, that I've just abolished my 6-minute-old addition to Mystery Hour where I was going to assign odds to every question that was likely to get an answer, because you could have been our first ever 1,000 to 1 shot on this. But unfortunately, thanks to Maria, I've already abolished that wizard wheeze. But I will put your question on the list nonetheless. Why do pigeons just do that little final short note at the end of their normal coo?
That's it.
Go on, once more before we go. Are you doing that just with your mouth and everything?
My hands clenched and blowing in between my thumbs.
Where's your phone then?
On the dashboard of the car.
That's why the line's not good, but that's the price you pay sometimes for radio magic. That's what radio was invented for. If we can't help Clive out, then frankly, I don't know why we're here. I don't know why we turn up to work every day if we can't help Clive out with that. Beautiful sounds. I should have got my Chirp-O-Matic app out, shouldn't I? To see whether or not my Chirp-O-Matic app recognised the pigeon noises that Clive was making as a pigeon. I love my Chirp-O-Matic app. You can often see me strolling around West London pointing my phone at trees for indiscernible reasons and then wondering why it never works. And the answer, of course, is that I live on a flight path. But it's great in the countryside. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
Ooh, I can't do it. I never could do that. I can't do that. I can't do a big whistle. No, it's not it, is it? Anyway, if you just tuned in, me neither. Lena is in Stanmore. Lena, question or answer?
I have a question.
Carry on.
I have a very generic dog whistle.
Can you do it for us?
Well, no.
Does it work? Would it work over the radio?
No, I mean, not like a whistle with my fingers.
No, I know. I'm just wondering, because a dog whistle, humans can't hear it, can they?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, you do know. When you blow your dog whistle, can you hear it?
Slightly.
Oh, you can hear something. I thought they were supposed to be like a tiny, tiny whistle thing, but the dog hears it really loudly.
Yes.
No, would it work over the radio? It doesn't matter now, because if you can hear it. I just wanted a silent whistle that only dogs can hear. Oh. And then we play that over the radio and see whether or not other people's dogs who are listening go a bit doolally. That would have been an interesting experiment.
Well, you see, this is it. It's like when I blow my dog whistle...
Is that a George Formby song?
When I blow my dog whistle...
Thank you for meeting my madness head on there, Lena. That was perfectly done.
You meet mine every day,
That was perfectly done. Go on, when you blow your dog whistle.
Only my dogs come back.
Oh.
Why wouldn't any of the other dogs come back?
Could it be that all dog whistles are ever so slightly differently calibrated?
Really?
I don't know. I'm just trying to, how it works. You eliminate the impossible. Whatever you are left with, however improbable, must be the answer.
Well, when there's like a batch load of them, and they're all the same. You would think that there's going to be a same manufacturing line for this dog.
You really would. I mean, of course you're right. Yeah. The manufacturing complications involved in having ever so slightly different pitched dog whistles are off the charts, aren't
Who's
they?
Who's going to
do that then? What about the first time you used it? Did you train your dogs to recognise the sound of your dog whistle?
No. I was just playing about with it. I thought, let's give this a go, because usually I just whistle and they come back. I thought, let me just give this a go.
Give it a toot.
Give it a toot.
And
they came back, and they both came
the chorus.
back.
That's the chorus. And it works. So so everyone with a dog whistle should theoretically be like a Pied Piper of dogs whenever they go to the park. That's a great question. Why doesn't everyone with a dog whistle get inundated with dog action? Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Lena. You're on the list. 0345 6060 973. So, how did we cut our toenails before toenail cutters were invented? What is the origin of the phrase salt of the earth? Why do pigeons do the 5151? Why do they do that little final mini coo on the end of their coos? What is the scientific explanation for baby brain? And when you blow a dog whistle, why doesn't every dog in town come running towards you? Craig is in Lawrencekirk in Aberdeenshire. Craig, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
Is it easier to swim from the deep end to the shallow end, or the shallow end to the deep end in a standard swimming pool doing the same stroke?
Sounds like the opening to a riddle, and that you've got the answer. But it must be easier from the shallow end. What do you mean by easier?
Is it easy? Can you swim quicker, or does it take less effort?
But I mean, it depends. What you're saying is if you've got your feet on the ground when you start, or if you're just holding the side, because you could start from the shallow end without having your feet on the ground, couldn't you?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
But you mean you've got your feet on the ground in the shallow? Well, it's got to be quicker because you're kicking off, aren't you? You're using your feet. Oh no, but you can do that the other way around, especially on back.
You kick off either. It just feels to me that as the water gets shallower,
strangest
it gets
question.
Easier.
As the water gets shallower, it gets easier. You think you speed up as you approach the shallow end?
I think so, yes, but my wife thinks the opposite.
This is the strangest question in ages. Isn't it? So it's got nothing to do with the starting off point. You think that the depth of the water affects the speed with which you move through it.
I think so. I think so. Yes, I think so. As the water gets shallower.
And your wife completely disagrees, or she thinks it's the other way round?
She thinks it's the other way around. She thinks it's easier the deeper the water.
So you're both persuaded that the depth of the water affects the speed with which you move through it, but you're in disagreement about which way round it is.
Correct.
That's marriage, Craig.
Indeed.
Let's find out. I don't know if we will, but we will do our best. 22 minutes after 12. It's all got a bit vintage this week. I like it. Hector's in Southampton. Hector, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
So I was reading a scientific paper about memory.
Get you, hey, with your scientific papers. Go on.
I know I'm quite boring.
It's not boring
it was
at
about
all.
Memory recall.
Oh, yes.
So when you're recalling a memory,
yes,
the same pattern of neurons firing that occurred at the time is replayed. So the woman on the phone was like, if she wants to remember a song about Jesus she sung in primary school, her brain would have to replay that pattern of neurons that she experienced at the time. And I want to know, how does your brain know to recall or replay that pattern of neurons?
Bloody hell, Hector.
I told you I was boring.
That's not boring, mate. I hate it when clever people describe themselves as boring. So it's a failing of our education system. It's just making my head hurt a bit. And so,
do you understand the question, though?
Yeah. Well, hang on. Don't spoil it, Hector. So we have. so you think of let's use the phrase memory bank.
Okay.
Just for simplicity. So if we think of a memory bank as containing countless files.
Yeah.
You want to know how the brain knows which file to pull out?
Yeah.
Because there's no reason, because in a way, you'd need to be able to see which file it was to know which one to pull out, but you can't see which one it was because you haven't pulled it out yet.
Yeah. And if it needs to know which file to pull out, surely we'll have to have another file to know that file to pull out.
That's kind of what I mean. So how does it... Right, I mean, if I still did odds on Mystery Hour questions, I'd give you a slightly better chance than Clive with his pigeons. I'd put you on, but I'd still be sticking you way out there on about 500 to 1. But I shall do my best to find out. I've understood the question. How does your brain know which memory to recall, if you like? Because it fires the same neurons that were fired at the time of the original experience. How on earth does it do that? I think, actually, I think I'm going to shorten your odds massively. Actually, I'm going to bring them down to 10s or 20s, or at least I would if I was still doing that failure of a feature on Mystery Hour, because someone will know that. That will probably be an area of study. Hector, thank you. Yeah, you stick with it with the scientific papers, mate. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Laura is in Sheffield. Laura, question or answer?
Hi, I've got an answer for you, James.
Carry on, Laura.
It was about the dog whistle question.
Oh, yes.
I mean, a very simple answer to that would be that not all dogs are whistle trained. So,
but she didn't think her dog was whistle trained. But you're telling us that it is actually, whether she realises it or not.
Yeah, it will be, because as she's blowing the whistle, the dogs come over to her just to investigate, probably the very first time it ever did it. Oh, why are you making that noise?
And it's my owner. Oh, crikey, there's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
And maybe even get a biscuit or something like that, or even just a little cuddle.
Exactly. So a bit of attention, bit of praise. You've listened to the whistle. Well done. Bit of force. That dog then goes, that noise gets, and it's classical conditioning is for one.
Little light bulb goes off. So if Lena were to make a fuss, if she were to go into the park, blow her whistle, and she did attract some random dogs, if she were to make a fuss of them, she would become the Pied Piper of dogs in her local park.
Yeah, she gives them a biscuit. She'll have a whole herd of them following her out of the park.
That's what Keith's like. Honestly, I wish I'd never given him a biscuit. I can't get rid of him. Qualifications?
I'm a dog behaviourist.
That is a beautiful answer. Have a round of applause.
Thanks very much.
It makes perfect sense. Even if Lena disputes your answer because she can't remember making a fuss with the dog the first time she used the whistle, that is a correct answer. My decision is final. It's all in the terms and conditions. 26 minutes after 12. Stephen's in Alcadiza in Spain. Stephen, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James. It's a question, please.
Carry on.
Statistically, what is the easiest Guinness World Record to break?
That's a nice question. Are you thinking, you got some charity work on the horizon, or are you just curious?
If I can find a relatively simple one to break, I might make a bit of money for someone. I just want to know what the easiest one is.
Well, let's have a think. I mean, it probably like making something big that most people can't be bothered to make, don't you think? Like the world's biggest omelette or something, but you need a big pan.
But then again, and if some people can't be bothered to make it, then it's probably going to be a bit of a pain to do. I want something that's relatively simple. It's going to furnish me with a medal saying I'm the Guinness World Record holder of
I mean, there is a flaw in your plan.
Of course.
1.46 million flaws, to be precise, Stephen.
You're going to have to explain that one to me, James, I'm afraid.
I'd say embarrassing now that I have to, but that is how many listeners that this programme currently enjoys, every single one of which could potentially hear the answer to your question and therefore determine immediately that they too will seek to break the easiest world record to break.
Do you know, I had no idea you had that many listeners, James.
Well, I don't like to talk about it.
It's very good news, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. Probably to be the first at something, but again, the flaw, the 1.46 million flaws in your thinking this morning or this afternoon could come back to haunt you. But we will find out. We will find out. We will try. We will try. I mean, it's a tricky one, but I like it. I've thought that myself in the past. I have wondered that myself in the past. So, to recap, it's a lovely collection of questions. We should start, hopefully, collecting a few more answers now. How did prehistoric people cut their toenails, or at least pre-clipper people? That's like pre-clipper people. It's a phrase, you know. It goes Neanderthal, Neolithic, pre-clipper, Homo sapiens. How did pre-clipper people cut their toenails? What is the origin of the phrase as a compliment, the salt of the earth? Why do pigeons do that little mini coo at the end of a run of coos that isn't a part of any other coos? Does the depth of the water affect the speed with which you can swim through it? And if so, which way round is it? 0345 60 60973. How does your memory know how does your brain know what memory, when you're trying to remember what's the name of that guy, how does your brain know where to go for the memory? If we get an answer to that, it's a weird one, that. And what's the easiest world record to break? It's coming up to 12:30. And I forgot. You think I've done it deliberately, won't you? That I've deliberately forgotten Maria's baby brain question as a kind of complicated joke on forgetfulness, but I haven't. I just wrote it down wrong. And what is baby brain? It's obviously real. I'm inundated with women telling me that they have suffered or are suffering from it. So what is baby brain? What's the scientific or biological explanation? It's coming up to 12:30. Tim Humphrey is here with your headlines.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
12:33. In order to distract from the fact that his Home Secretary has disappeared, Rishi Sunak has told Morning Television that his favourite author is Jilly Cooper. I mean, what does one make of that? Jilly Cooper. I love Jilly Cooper. I love her novels, or at least I did when I was a 15-year-old boy who was handed the book in a dormitory at boarding school and surprised to discover that you could hold it in the palm of your hand and it would fall open at certain places. But Jilly Cooper, he can't have said it was his favourite author, Jilly Cooper. I don't think he's read any Jilly Cooper in his life. He's just Googled what do normal people read on holiday. And it came back Jilly Cooper. Well, no, that would mean he would be using Google in about 1988. But anyway, there it is. Still no sign of Suella Braverman, but Rishi Sunak's cultural hinterland extends to Jilly Cooper, which oddly seems feasible, doesn't it? Back to Mystery. 12:34 is the time. Danny's in Leeds. Danny, question or answer?
It's an answer for you, James.
Carry on, Danny.
Yeah, regarding the swimming pool question about the depth of the water making a difference to your swim.
Nice
yeah, it does actually make a difference. The deeper the water, the faster you will swim.
Really?
Yeah, it's all to do with the feedback of the water. So you've got a lot more movement in shallower water when you're swimming. The waves are coming back at you.
So there's more resistance.
Slower.
More resistance.
Yeah. A lot more resistance, yeah.
Can you remember which way round it was? Whether it was Craig or his wife who thought it was... I think it was Craig's wife who's right, wasn't it?
Yeah, Craig's wife's right, yeah.
She's got it. What are your qualifications?
I'm a triathlete.
Are you?
I do a lot of swimming. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
There's something I thought, because I've noticed in different swimming pools, I swim differently.
Right.
And also the other thing that affects it is whether there's any walls at the side of the pool. Some pools are level with the side of the pool, so they'd be a lot easier to swim in. So when you get the waves, they just go over the side and down the grate. Whereas if you've got a wall, some pools and walls are higher than the water, so you're getting feedback off the walls as well.
Well, I never... I mean, you triathletes swim in the sea usually, or in open water, but not when you're training.
Yeah, no, when we're training, obviously as well during winter, we're always in a pool. But the Olympic pools that you see on telly when they're racing, the pools are all of equal depth.
Are they?
They're usually 3 metres deep.
I never knew that. There's no deep
depth.
end in a proper pool then? A proper competitive pool?
They're all completely level.
Are you still...
And they're usually 3 metres deep.
Well, you live and learn. That's quite deep, isn't it? Are you still competing now?
Yeah, still training now. Ironman Barcelona in October.
What's that for? What's happening in Barcelona?
So it's an Ironman, so it's a 2.4 mile sea swim, followed by 112 mile on bike and a marathon run at the end.
God, mate, I'm already busy. I've already got something on. Otherwise, I'd have loved that. That would have been great. Well, best of luck with it. I'll give you a round of applause in the meantime.
Okay, mate.
Look at that. No, likewise, Danny. Take care, man. Look at that. I'm completely humbled. I'm not a bit intimidated. Steve's in Benfleet. Steve, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, mate.
Regarding the Guinness World Record.
Yeah.
So, your caller before, I had the exactly same thought many years ago, looked into it, and what I discovered was the easiest ones to break were fancy dress running ones. Now, Guinness, a few years ago, brought out all these new records, so basically different categories of fancy dress to run as fast as you can, either in a marathon or a half marathon.
Right.
And I found one which was dressing as a charity awareness ribbon, half marathon, but they set the bar so low initially, so it was basically 2 hours. So you could pick any fancy dress,
right,
and it was 2 hours, and then you could basically get yourself a Guinness World Record, and that's what I did. I ran half marathon dressed as a charity awareness ribbon, and I got a world record certificate, but then it got beat, and then because the bar was set so low, all these different types of fancy dress keep getting beat. I mean, there's some crazy ones where people run half marathons in a set of handcuffs and they run in 1 hour 20, or a full marathon in under 3 hours in a set of handcuffs,
and they get a Guinness certificate. They get a Guinness certificate.
Yeah, I've got one.
So there's a
I've got it
category.
on my wall. I only had it.
Go on.
I only had it for 9 months.
It's not bad.
And we were talking about it around no, not bad at all. Talking about a Christmas Day, and I said it's probably gone. Looked at it, and found out Christmas Day that same year that it'd gone. So
never look stuff up. But you keep the certificate, though.
Yeah, keep the certificate.
Did you make the
everything,
book?
Yeah.
Did you make the book?
No, I chased them up for it, and I was like, "Please put me in the book." And they were like, "Oh, we don't know." And then it came a print, and did make the book.
So you've got a different category for every mode of fancy dress.
And not only there's loads of different modes of fancy dress, but also you could enter your own. So hypothetically,
so Steve needs to come up with a fancy dress that no one has ever run in before, and then do a cheeky half marathon at a fairly average pace, and he'll be all right for
under 2 hours.
For a few months.
You could have if there was enough pressure. I think, and enough want from the public, you could be fastest half marathon or fastest marathon dressed as a James O'Brien impersonator.
That's just weird.
It's because there's so many records, obviously, that have got to a point where they can't be beaten. They're just constantly looking for new categories.
Just to keep the excitement alive.
Keep it alive, and that's why you'll always see at the end of every London marathon, because London's quite good for it, there'll be at least 50 world records. I
had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. And, I mean, this is a Ray Liotta moment, I think, because you actually did research the easiest world record in the world to break, and you broke it. Well, not even break, you invented it.
No, it was already invented. They invented it at the Toronto. So it was a category already invented at the Toronto Half Marathon.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether someone said it or someone kind of they just set it up as a target.
But
and then
all you had to do was get
2 hours.
You had to get under 2 hours, and then you became the world record holder.
Correct.
What did you do?
And the scary thing was, I did it in 1 hour. 49 seconds, 49 minutes dead.
Okay.
And then the previous week for the ladies one, it was 1:49.19. So I mean, I thought I couldn't go around telling I've got a world record. Actually, there's a lady in Canada who's faster than me by how many? So I had that, but then it's now down at 1:42. But
well, are you going to let them? Are you just going to leave it, Steve? Are you going to let them rob your title like that, or are you going to come back at them like Cohen over?
I'll let one of my kids try it. I'm getting too old and too bold for it now.
Yeah.
So it was only 3 years, 4 years ago now. But legs are not what they were 4 years ago. So I'll let someone else do it. But there are so many different categories out there.
Well, that is I was not expecting to get a Ray Liotta on this one, and I appreciate that there are many other people who may have gone down similar paths, but you're here and you get one.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
And of course,
I want to joke.
There it is.
I thought I'd never get the opportunity. I thought I'd never get the opportunity to ask a question, let alone answer one and get a Ray Liotta.
Okay, right. What's better, the Guinness? I mean, that lasts for more than 9 months as well. Now that you hold that forever.
Yeah, no. If I can get a certificate with it?
Don't worry, on your jog. There we go. 12:41. Honestly, no, we're satisfied customers. Michael's in Mitcham. Michael, question or answer?
James.
Hello.
Hi, James. It's a question.
Carry on.
I would like to know what is the national anthem of England. The reason I'm asking this is everybody knows on the football, on the Olympics is Great Britain, it's not England. But on the football and Euros, you always hear God Save the Queen.
You
obviously,
do.
now it's going to be now. God Save the King now, obviously. But on the Commonwealth Games, when England wins a medal, they sing something else. Which I never heard before.
You've never heard it before?
No, to be honest, not. Okay. All right.
What?
So if that is the English national anthem, why they don't sing it on the football?
You're only allowed one question, Michael.
I'm confused. Please help.
Well, the answer is Jerusalem, which is a poem by William Blake set to music in, I presume, the 19th century by a chap called Hubert Parry. So that is it, Jerusalem. And did those feet in ancient time walk up on England's mountains green? And the answer to the you're not really allowed a second bit, but the second bit would be that they compete. No, hang on. Why would it not be set? So you've got the Scots have theirs.
Yes.
Why would England? So why don't they do God Save the Queen? Is what you're really saying? Why don't they do God Save the King at the Commonwealth Games for England?
I do understand that if they don't sing God Save the King on the Commonwealth Games, because obviously you have Wales. But on football, like the World Cup, the Euros, why they don't sing Jerusalem?
There was a vote. Do you know what the answer is?
No.
I don't normally do this, but someone sent it to me and I've checked and it's true. And it's so funny. I'm going to share it with you. They had a referendum.
What?
There was a vote. And you are not going to believe what the winning result was, Michael.
Please.
52%.
Against 48, let me guess.
I don't know. I don't know what, but 52% of the vote for Jerusalem. God Save the Queen came in second place, but I haven't got the figures in front of me of whether it was. But what an amazing discovery that is together.
Wow.
There it is.
Wow.
Good Lord.
Well,
round of applause for both of us, actually. It just kind of popped out there. There we go.
Thank you, James.
No, thank you, Michael.
You're the man, James.
Take care. Thank you. Great stuff. That's not the same question that we had a couple of weeks ago, because it was oddly clever clogs. I might put you in idiot's corner, Jason. No, I won't. That's just a misstep rather than an aberration. Tina is in Tame. Question or answer, Tina?
It's an answer to your question about salt of the earth, and you knew it really because you used to be a good Catholic boy and go to church.
All of that.
Right. So Jesus says to his disciples, "You need to be the light of the world and the salt of the world, because those are the two indispensable things. In those days, you needed salt to preserve your food. Light, light's obvious, isn't it?
So it was salt of the world originally.
No, salt of the earth.
Salt of the earth, but
light
not as in
world,
not salt in light of the world, but using earth as a synonym for world.
No, it's about salt. The two things
I know.
I know.
I'm just saying earth and world. It's not earth as in salt, earth, soil. It's earth as in the earth.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's salt. Because he carries on to say, if the salt loses its savour, what use is it?
Yeah. So you need to be the absolute essentials for humanity.
Yes, you need to be out there doing the biz, is basically what he's saying.
Matthew 13.
Matthew 13. No.
Yeah. No?
Matthew 5, verse 13.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah, you see, Dot Brown would have known that, but she's gone, bless her.
She would have known that, wouldn't she?
She would. She'd have quoted it, I'm sure.
That is a beautiful answer. What are your qualifications?
I'm a Christian and I go to church and I hear these things regularly.
That'll do nicely. Round of applause for Tina.
Thank you very much.
Salt of the earth, Tina. Well played. Lovely stuff. 12:45.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It is 12:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I need answers. I want answers. Answers. How did we cut our toenails? We've done Salt of the Earth. We've pigeons, memory banks. We've done world records. We've done. Oh, actually, no. We've done. Sorry, I take it all back. We're doing quite well this week. So pigeons and toenails. Is that all that's left? And baby brain. Baby brain. Come on. Everyone, so surely I gave that evens. It's a good job I've abandoned that 6-minute enthusiasm for the idea of giving odds to every question on Mystery Hour, isn't it? 12:50 is the time. Do I sound nervous? I'm quite nervous. I'm playing myself in a radio drama tonight. Can you imagine the arrogance involved in signing up for something? I can't tell you any more about it at this stage. It's a rhetorical question, Keith. At this stage, I can't tell you anything else. But yeah, I'm already getting nervous. Just got the email through about it. Thinking, have I made a mistake here? What if it's terrible? Anyway, onwards and upwards. Martin's in Stamford, Connecticut. Question or answer, Martin?
I'm afraid I've got another question.
That's all right.
I fly into London from New York about anywhere between 3 and 6 times a year.
Okay,
cool. Every time I fly over, we are forced to fly over London as far east as Essex or Kent, and then back into Heathrow, adding probably at least half an hour onto our flights. Wondering what the rules are and the rationale is for forcing planes flying from the west. Over central London and back into Heathrow from the east.
You're queuing, aren't you? I think there's no room for you to land.
But why can't they accommodate us by letting us land from the west rather than the east? Never ever have we landed from the west. It's always in over central London and then back to Heathrow again.
Is that a mystery? I mean, they're not. I'm going to say something now, and one of us, as a consequence of what I'm about to say, is going to feel a bit silly. But I have no way of knowing whether it is. Did you have a nice drink there, Martin?
Did I have a nice what?
A nice drink?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I could hear that. It was nice. It's usually me and my enormous mug that interrupts Mystery. So I'm going to say something that is going to leave one of us feeling a bit silly. I've got a feeling it might be me, but there's a 48% chance it could be you. Runways are one way.
Not in all airports.
Well, they are at Heathrow.
An airport like Chicago can accommodate flights coming in from both directions.
I'm pretty sure Heathrow can't.
Okay.
Would that be the answer to your question?
I guess it would be.
Yes, so it's you. You're a bit silly, not me. What a relief.
Otherwise,
what do you mean? All right, well, I'll leave it on the board. Because I did the Sherlock Holmes, I eliminated the impossible, and whatever I was left with, however improbable, was in fact the answer. But I think the runways are one way, and that would explain why the plane has to do that. Because they can't it's not like you drive at home; you can't reverse into it, can you?
No.
So I'll put it on the board. Thank you. But if that is the answer, I shall be even more pleased with myself than usual. Thank you, Marty. He's made me thirsty now. I'm going to have a gulp of mine while I say to Richard in Oswald Street, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
So, toenails.
Yeah. Oh, marvellous. I love the idea that someone has just turned on their radio because they hate my guts, but they can't wait for Sheila Fogarty. And the first word they heard was, So, toenails. Carry on, Richard.
I mean, it's purely speculation from my part, but I lived on the boat for a long time and was always barefoot, and I kept meaning to buy nail clippers.
Yes.
So I'm thinking just doing natural abrasion. I was always on and off the boat, and then briefly I walked as a gardener as well.
Yeah.
While I was gardening, once again, hands in the soil all the time, lots of abrasion. So
you wouldn't need it if you were living outdoors, especially if you weren't wearing shoes.
Exactly.
Running around like a mad...
knives, prehistoric, lots and lots of lack of footwear going on.
You wouldn't. And if it did get particularly unpleasant, you could probably just fold it back and snap it off or tear it, file it with a stone. Apparently I was completely wrong about Heathrow, which is just as well, really, that I didn't sound smug at all in my answer to that question. I don't know what's wrong with your phone line, but you've got yourself a round of applause.
Fabulous.
Thank you. So it's just Baby Brain, Heathrow and pigeons now that are remaining. I told you we wouldn't get one on pigeons. I gave him 1,000 to 1 on that back when I used to put odds on Mystery Hour questions before I stopped. I started putting odds on Mystery Hour questions at 4 minutes past 12 today, and I stopped at 7 minutes past. Not one of my most successful wheezes. Hang on a minute. Jean's in Norwich. Jean, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
So it's why pigeons have that 5-syllable call. Well, basically, there's two kinds of birds. There's birds that have the ability to learn vocally, and there are birds that don't. So there are oceans and non-oceans. And a pigeon and a dove is a non-ocene.
Right.
So they're born with the innate, it's innate.
That's
so
the noise they make.
Is the noise they make. And my dad used to call it, eat more wheat Judy. That syllable that they make. And a dove is just like so eat more wheat, Judy. And a dove is just a 3. And
a wood pigeon as well. What's a wood pigeon?
And a wood pigeon, the same. If you think about a robin and birds like that, they can add flourishes and they can out-competition each other, but doves and pigeons can't.
So, I mean, it's not perhaps the answer Clive was looking for, but that is just their genetic programming. That is the only noise they can make.
So they're non-ocenes, so they're born programmed, and that's it. They can't learn. You'll never hear them doing anything else.
So they're announcing to the rest of the bird world, there's a pigeon over here, lads.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's it. I am a pigeon.
Yeah, but that's it. They don't have the ability to do anything else. And I learnt that because I love birds, and I read a book called Corvus by Esther Wolfson, and she explained it in the book. And I wrote it down because I really wanted to remember that fact.
Gosh.
So,
and this is why probably subconsciously you thought one day on Mystery Hour this will come up and I'm going to get the round of applause.
It was. There's so many times I wanted to phone in but not had the guts to do it. So
that's
I
a
just
beautiful
thought I had
answer.
to phone in. I listen to your show, big fan.
Oh, thank you, Jean. As I get older, I get more and more intoxicated by wildlife and birds in particular, ornithology in particular. I don't know why. It's chick season, isn't it now?
You like Swifts, don't you?
I do like Swifts, although I failed to tempt any into my Swift box this year. I will try again.
I sent you a picture of my Swift box with a camera in it.
Did you?
Yeah, they're a bit late at the moment.
So it's still time then? Is there still time?
Yeah, there's still time. Yeah, there's still time.
I'll get on the case when I get home.
And if you've got a Swift caller, if you can play a Swift sound...
Where do you get that from?
Attract them. So, you can get them from...
Can you just download it, or do you need to buy something?
No. You don't need to download it. So if you go onto Swift, Action for Swifts, or Swift Local Network... Yeah. You should be able to get it on there.
Right, you're on.
Or I could email it to you. They're free.
Would you? Well, go on then. James@lbc.co.uk if you could. I'll look out for that.
Okay,
Thank you. Well, I feel bad now. I can only give you a round of applause. What a beautiful answer. Clive will be delighted. He now knows the answer to the pigeon question. Jean, fantastic. And I'm also going to read Corvus by Esther Wolfson. That's right up my Strasse. As soon as I finish writing my own latest effort. David's in Birmingham. Question or answer, David?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, mate.
It's about the runways and the
I'd embarrass myself a bit.
You always come in from the one direction.
Yeah.
It's down to, I'm afraid, wind.
Yeah. Nothing to do with one-way runways.
No, because there's actually 2 parallel runways at Heathrow, and I think they alternate between the 2.
Sorry, Martin.
So what actually happens is, in order to you take off into the wind and land into the wind to increase the apparent speed over the wing, which gives you more lift. So it slows down the amount, or it reduces the amount of thrust that you need, and it gives you more control.
Qualifications?
All-round aviation geek, and I work for a company that makes high-lift systems. So that's the bits
beautiful.
Front and back of the wing that move.
That is it. You're home and dry. Round of applause for David.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. It's very, very hard to pick a favourite this week, but I am going to go for... I got to go for Clive, haven't I? With the pigeon impressions. I think I do. It's Clive. That's it for me for another day. If you missed any of today's show, it's worth rewinding. It really is. You can listen back on Catch Up Player, where you can rewind live radio or enjoy the whole show podcast. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcast, including Full Disclosure. So rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
Briefly, was there an answer on the swimming thing?
Yes, there was.
What was it?
What do you think?
Well, when I swam in the Olympic pool, which was a joy.
The Olympic pool.
I felt like I was flying. And I also felt that the water was gorgeous and silky as well, but I wondered if it was to do with the depth of the water.
There will be two reasons for that, Sheila Fogarty. The first is indeed the depth of the water. An Olympic pool would have a 3-metre depth, but interestingly, it would be a uniform, as you probably noticed. It would be 3 metres all the way through. There's no shallow end and no deep end.
Yes.
So the deeper the water, the faster you go, and also the nature of the walls, because it's all about resistance. How much resistance is coming back at you as you swim, and in the shallow end there is more feedback or resistance coming back at you. And if the walls are closer together, so a narrower pool, and also the pools where it laps over the edges, that would help remove.
Okay.
Is that enough?
Now.
Is
That's
that
enough now.
Okay, sorry, I got a bit carried away.
No, but it's good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
I think it was deeper than 3 metres.
It might have been, but it was uniformly deep. It was uniformly deep.
Yeah.
3 metres is quite deep. I'm 185. I'll stand up.
I think
I'll
it was
stand
deeper.
up.
Well, I'm about the same height as you. Well,
Yeah,
not quite,
so that's
but
another.
Yeah, another one.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah, I still think it was deeper
Yeah,
than that.
maybe.
I might be wrong. Anyway, this is not getting the baby washed, is it?
True.
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 Getting the baby washed, is it?
True.